All right. Good evening. Welcome to this July 2nd meeting of Metro's Rider Advisory Council. I'm Chair Cole Stout, and I'm going to call this meeting to order and ask that John call the roll.
Great. Good evening, everybody. Chair Stout,
Here.
Vice Chair Siddiqui, Vice Chair Wei, said he couldn't make it. Solomon Chen. Here. Matthew Clark. Here. Eli Crivera-Frankel.
Here.
Lucas Habaski, not here. Alex Mendelson.
Here.
Brian Meyer.
Here.
Joseph Pope.
Here.
Pat Sheehan. Don't see him. Thomas Shepard.
Here.
Irene Stevens.
Here.
No. Hendy Tefesi.
Here.
Brandon Wu.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, John. I'll ask for the approval of the agenda with the amendment to strike item 3. And if there are no objections, we will consider the agenda approved. Great. Next item up is public comment. Do we have any members of the public, either on the conference line or here in public, that would like to share something with the RAC? Yeah, but step on up.
Thank you. Bill Orleans, Greenbelt. The first Riders Advisory Council, The first Riders Advisory Council meeting I've been to since before COVID. I could sometimes participate virtually, but I'm constantly losing my connection, so welcome back to me here. Some of the members of the RAC will have heard a bit of my public comment while we were out waiting for John to come and beckon us in. In the old Jackson Graham building, one of its better features was as soon as one walked through the doors, one could turn to the left, even without going through security, and check the rack on the wall immediately inside Jackson Graham. There was a rack with every Metrobus route's timetable. Now, sometimes they ran short on supplies, but regularly riders could go into the Jackson Graham building without any other reason other than to check for their timetables for those routes or maybe a different route that they might want to utilize. It's a suggestion that's been made here previously that that feature be returned to the new Metro headquarters so that people would again be able to pick up timetables for routes, either their own route or routes they're unfamiliar with. Now, with regard to the new timetables, I'm glad to see them. Frankly, I had thought Metro management was not intending to return to paper timetables. So I'm glad to see them. Of course, when I went to Greenbelt Station, I live in Greenbelt, last week, I was looking for the various P buses that serve Greenbelt Station, and I couldn't find. I found 2 or 3, one for the district and 2 for the district, but none for Prince George's County, specifically none for Greenbelt. I hope to see more of these both on the buses and here, but I realize that Metro wants, among other things, to save paper in the printing of its timetables. And I realize that with what is assured riders' assurance that their buses will be arriving more frequently, specifically at specific intervals, it doesn't help to say that the frequency is 15 minutes if I arrive at my old bus stop and then remember that that bus stop no longer exists because Metro's eliminated it, and I walk a quarter mile to my new bus stop, and I get there. If there's no electronic signage, and most bus stops will never, or at least in the foreseeable, not my lifetime will they have electronic, it doesn't help that much that I know that in 15 minutes, theoretically, the bus will arrive. It would be more helpful to know that at 6:12 or 7:14, or I'm suggesting that in printing new timetables, we return to the old form, even though it's theoretical that the bus will arrive in every 15 minutes. Lastly, on the question of both bus and rail, the call center concludes at 8 o'clock at night. That's way too early for somebody who doesn't necessarily know, since, especially in Prince George's County, some of the Prince George's buses will be concluding their service roughly between 7 and 8, unlike other jurisdictions maybe. it doesn't help that, for someone who needs to know what bus I can catch, where, to get to where, and when it's arriving. At that point, the hours, the frequency won't be 15 minutes presumably. The call center, we ought to eat the cost. The call center should stay open longer to serve bus riders and rail riders who have questions about how they're going to get to where they want to go. I thank you all very much, and I look forward to the next in-person meeting.
Thank you, Bill. Anyone else? John, I don't think we have anyone on the teams.
No, just Irene is the only person on Teams besides us.
Awesome. All right, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda. As y'all can see, we have our general manager here, Randy Clark. I think might be your first track meeting in quite a few years.
Unfortunately, a long time, yeah. I think I had one I canceled, and then I blew up my legs, and with my knee surgeries, and I was a little out of commission there for a while, so.
Well, we're happy to have you here.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Sorry, it's been a while.
Yeah, so this is kind of, I don't think you don't have a presentation. It's kind of just, we'll have a conversation with Randy for about a little under 30 minutes. We have a stop time, a soft stop at 6:30, so let's try to be diligent with our time.
Hey, well, thanks for having me, Mr. Chair, and the whole committee. Appreciate your work, and you give great reports. And Brian, you used to give great reports, and there's meaningful information in there about the survey. And, look, listen, I've said from the day I got here, I'm the ultimate customer advocate. I'm on the system, maybe I'm not the most, but even last year when I was at a commission for Berwick, I was still in the top, I think, 3%. So I'm definitely back to 1% this year. And I use it at all times of the week, all days of the week, bus, rail. And just really important that I think our leadership team is out on the system truly being customers. We have a lot of internal work now that we monitor things more from a customer lens than I think we ever used to. But with that said, hearing from customers themselves and you representing them is really important to us. And so, hold us accountable. I actually have no problem with that. I want to know where we can improve. Our job is to constantly improve with the resources that we have available. Maybe highlight a couple things, and then quite frankly, I just wanted to hear from you all what topics are of interest for you. Could be a topic that you're like, hey, just what's going on with X, or I've heard this, or hey, I do have an actual problem, and here's the thing, and then we can, if I can answer today, I will. If not, we'll get back to you all with more information. So a couple things I want to highlight. So obviously Chief Anzalo's with us, and he's going to do a public safety update here. Can't say enough about the chief and his command staff and the entire MTTPD team, and plus all of our partnerships. The chief is a very humble person and will not acknowledge how much he personally is leading the charge here. He's just doing a fantastic job, and I've told him he's never allowed to retire as long as I'm here. On the public safety front, just this morning, the chief and I were talking about data from June. Hopefully, Chief, I'm not stealing too much of your thunder here, but June continued. We're still at our 7-year low. Crime is, June was a little higher than May. Quite frankly, it's just a busier month. As we get a little warmer, it's a little busier month, unfortunately. But crime still down 7 year, and we're currently on pace right now for the lowest crime year we've ever had on a metro. Records go back to 2001. After that, it's like this old school paper, FBI stuff that might not ever be found, quite frankly. But as far as our records go, we're on pace for the lowest crime year ever. And that is a big deal. 3 years ago when I got here, crime was, I think it's fair to say, you got to use the word out of control carefully, but it was certainly not feeling great. We had shootings, we had stabbings. Rightfully, people were a little worried to be on the system. Plus, we had our staff that was a little worried to be out there. So I think it's been transformational, our public safety efforts. Fare evasion is down very significantly on the rail side. On the bus side, we're doing all the best we can in a very difficult environment on bus because it's everywhere. It's not just a fixed station. All of our partners are going fare free at the same time that we're trying to collect fares, which is very difficult. I'm not putting a thumb on the policy decision. I'm talking about our role of enforcement. Very challenging to do that, but even on the bus side, we're seeing a little bit of better result as well. Ridership, June will be the 51st straight month of ridership gain. 51st, kind of apropos, being in DC, the should be 51st state. So we're leading the country We think we'll lead the country again in June. There's no reason that we shouldn't, we don't think. It's a big deal to lead the country in ridership growth. Bus, we're the only large bus system in the country that carries more people now than we did before the pandemic. Also incredible feat. And that's before Better Bus kicked in, which we think is going to drive better service overall. And I'm sure we'll want to talk about Better Bus in a sec. In the month of June, we got ATO officially launched on every line, 16 years. There's people in this room that 16 years ago, I think we're maybe just born, or maybe not yet. So I think it's a big deal to get that technology back. It's much safer, it's more reliable, it's going to be more cost efficient. It's been a little challenging with our heat rides and some weather to get full days, full ATO, but that's fine. Some incremental on that is okay. Better Bus, big launch on the weekend, massive effort by staff. It's been years. You've all participated, thank you. Massive community effort. In hot weather, we've had everyone. The coolest thing about Better Bus, a lot of ways for us internally, it's a huge cultural unifying thing for the agency. Having people from finance, HR, procurement, legal, people like that out on the system giving customer information and helping our bus team would never have been done before at this organization. Hopefully it recognizes how much we care about bus. I know rail gets so much attention in the media, and it might think that we care more about rail. We definitely don't. Of anything, I think rail is where we want to continue to squeeze more good out of the network, more coordination with our partners. I want to be carrying 500,000 a day on bus, not 420. 430. I want us peak days to get to 500,000, and we can do that with a little bit of more investment. We can be there. Weekend schedules kicked in, so we're now opening earlier and closing later on weekends. First time in I think 8 or 9 years for that. Very important for the service economy, especially, and then on the weekends for the airport and Amtrak connections. So really proud of that. The other thing that I think, I'll wrap up and then I'll tell you a couple focus areas I'd love to hear from you all is probably the thing I'm most proud of in 3 years is we just got announced as the Transit Agency of the Year by APTA. And what that process is a bunch of peers rank a variety of categories. And for us to win that, I don't think Metro's won that in 20 some years. To be recognized by all of our peers around the country as being the best. And we think we're the best. We fundamentally do believe we're the best transit agency in the country. We feel like we're back on top. And to get recognized for that is a big deal. We have an enormous amount of pressure on us that other agencies do not have, being in the fishbowl. When members of Congress, federal staff, NTSB, and on and on and on ride the system, the level of performance we have to deliver is very high. Every little thing, a down escalator, disgruntled person, cleanliness, the lens, just as you all know, the fishbowl here, it's one person and it turns into a whole thing that no one would even talk about in San Francisco, Cleveland, Seattle, or Miami. So in a lot of ways, we're all beneficial to live here because we get a high quality system because of the extra pressure that we feel to perform. The bad part is, not to be, but when you work here, it's a never ending, there is no day off of not performing. So we take that very, very serious. We performed fantastic for Pride weekend. World Pride, obviously, probably didn't turn out the size of event we all originally hoped and thought for a variety of other factors, but we had a very, very busy weekend and we performed very well. The Army 250th was a big event for us, another national security event. We performed very well. We're ready for July 4th. July 4th is going to be, with Friday being a July 4th, with Beyonce and with the Nats. The weather looks pretty good too. We are in for probably a pretty monster of a day. So we'll be all working, hope to deliver great service for the region. I want to acknowledge we had a couple days last month that were not good days. And I appreciate your comments at the board meeting. They were right on target and quite frankly something that I think needs more and more attention. Our signaling system is getting old. It's safe. We're working on it every day. But at some point, a 1970 fridge, it only lasts so long, and you got to spend a lot of money to keep it running. And it's harder and harder to get parts and the training and all that kind of thing. So we desperately need to move our CBTC, our communication-based train control system, forward. And then we're going to have a big business plan related to that in December and tie into this year's budget of what the signaling and potentially other automation elements. But minimum, we have to move our signaling program forward. It is, in my opinion, is not even close. It's the #1 priority of this organization. There's nothing even remotely close to it that we need to work on. Lastly, I'll tell you a couple focus areas for me. Bus reliability. We have some ideas about continuing to manage bunching and gapping, but we want to get the network design done. Want to see about how the run times. There's a bunch of run times that we'll probably have to make adjustments on. When you move 100+ routes, the run times are going to be, some I'm hearing are really exact, and others are like, oh, we're off by 2 minutes, we're off by 4. 4 minutes might be off now, but when we get a little traffic, it's actually normal. We're looking at it every day. There's a whole team, and all they're doing is crunching runtime to see about that. But I want us to work very diligently on bus reliability. So if you go to our control center, I think a lot of you were there, there's big boards of our most important routes. And it's not that every route's not important, but bus bunching really happens and gapping on our biggest high-frequency routes where we move, so like the 70s. Not the 70s, oh my God, I caught myself. I'll be in trouble upstairs, and then I did that. The D80 is a good example, which is the old 33. An incredibly important crosstown route. It's our #1 growth route too. It's growing faster than every route. That route, we need to make sure performs at a high reliability. So there's stuff we can control, but we're working with our partners, like say a DDOT or Montgomery or Prince George's in Northern Virginia localities. Where do we need better signal transit priority? Where do we need floating bus stops? Where do we need bus queues, queue jumps? Where do we need more red paint? Do we need red paint only for 2 blocks, and that's good enough because that's the jam, or do we need it for 2 miles? All of that stuff, we are aggressively working plans and thoughts behind that. I don't want people to think like, oh, we just did the bus network. Bus network is the new baseline that we can now grow and push harder from. Not, oh, that's the work. That's the work to start the harder work. I hope no one in the staff is listening. They'll be like, will this guy go away? The other thing, we are clean, but I want to continue to advance cleaning technology. A good example is we're actually testing some escalator cleaning with, they got these, they look like vacuum robot kind of things. Ways that we can really get deeper cleaning. You probably have seen now we have end-of-line cleaning on bus, but we also now have it on rail where people are trying to clean the terminals better. So that is a very targeted effort we're spending money on to make sure our vehicles are cleaner. And then lastly, probably the #1 thing I'm focused on is just this digitalization of Metro, modernizing everything we do to the 2025 and beyond. So it's behind the scenes, back of house, our HR and financial systems. It's elevator and escalators. We got about 30% of them being monitored in real time right now. Understanding faults, really reducing the downtime. Tablets for all of our staff out in the field. The station managers that I talk to love them. They're doing Translate. They're helping customers. They're getting to see information. They can work on fare things. Our Fare Tap Ride and Go has been fantastic. We want to grow partnerships around our fare systems. We want police. All of our cruisers are getting outfitted with new laptops so they can have better access to all of our live video on buses, trains for response. We're just doing so much of that. This moving us as a tech organization and as fast as we could go. It's hard. You got to keep it's like running a marathon. We'll use this example. I was at the doctor today. So it's, keeping an old thing going while you're trying to be brand new is very hard, right? If you're brand new, everyone's like, oh yeah, all the new stuff, but you got to keep the thing running at the same time. So those are our focus areas. Then there's tons of other stuff, right? We got a big training center we're trying to get built. We want to do a heavy repair overhaul facility. Bladensburg is just about to open. We want to solve Western one day. We have an electrification program that we're still working through, our zero emission program. Our 8Ks and all of the excitement around that. There's all this potential around RFK that we're coordinating and collaborating with. There's just so many things to do here. That's the one thing about this place that's amazing. We'll never not have a hard, fun day trying to make things better. So thanks for letting me kind of download a lot of the stuff that, like, what's happening and what we're working on. But I'd just love to hear from you all, from your perspective, what's great, what's not, some rumors I can dispel, rumors I can confirm as best I can. So yeah, thanks for letting me be with you.
Thank you, Randy. I'll open it up to anyone on the rec. What do you, questions, thoughts, feedback on anything Randy shared or didn't share? I have a few things on my list, but I want you guys to go first. Go ahead.
Hey, Randy. Well, first, I want to say, since you've came here in the last 3 years, just talking to my friends and just general feedback, I think Metro has been super positive. I think my friends will constantly send me social media posts, involving you or about you, that are very positive. So I think it's really reverberated around, I would say, like kind of the cultural impact of what Metro kind of is and the view of Metro. So I think that's very positive and really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
I want to ask a little bit about kind of fiscal sustainability. I know that's, there was a moment a couple years ago when, there was a big, question about funding and obviously some of the changes in the budget, moving things to ATO and which would result in savings and allows us to open up service. I just want to hear kind of thoughts on how to, not only maintain fiscal kind of responsibility, but also just in case, some other emergency would happen in the future, kind of what Metro is doing to make sure that kind of stays intact.
Yeah, great question. So really proud of what we've all pulled together. We've identified savings and cost containment of over $500 million in a couple of years. It's really amazing. The team has worked so hard at that. Then our partner stepped up and kind of backfilled they had multiple years of not, with the subsidy, and really stepped up all 3 states to take care of that. So on the operating side, we're actually in a pretty good spot. Now we got to keep ridership moving in the right direction. We're not going to grow like we did the last year. I mean, that's virtually impossible. Actually, it's almost like we don't have the trains to do that anyway. But we got to keep growing. We got to keep collecting those fares. If we solved our bus fare evasion problem, we would actually be really good because we could really then invest a lot more in the bus system. Everyone wants more bus, and I literally don't have the resources to deliver. If we collected 40 or 50 million more of people not paying, we would have an incredibly more sophisticated bus system for everybody. So anyway, that's a larger kind of conversation. But I'm glad that you brought up the sustainability. The ATO savings is great. We're working on digitalization things. We're going to end this year about $110 million under budget, which is a huge amount of money. Almost all of that we're plowing back into the capital program. We're carrying over $28 million to balance FY26. And I committed to find $10 million more savings in FY26 in the approved budget. And that's up for me and the team to deliver. And I promised the board I would do that. While $10 million is a lot, it's not going to move the long-term needle. What we have to solve long-term is this true, dedicated, predictable funding source. If we don't solve our capital program soon, the likelihood is that the proposed budget that I come out with this year will have pretty significant reductions in capital because we got to start really reducing spend to make our cash last longer. Right now, we're probably about FY29, give or take. We're running out of debt capacity. We're doing everything we can, including about $100 million back this year. So maybe we can get to 2030. I doubt it, though. And so FY29 sounds like a long way away. It's not. We're already having our first meetings on FY27 budget. And when you do capital, it is multi-year planning. So this is a good example. Are we going to buy options for our 8Ks? Are we going to buy more 60-footers versus 40s? Are we going to do zero emission? Are we going to upgrade another garage? What are we doing on signaling? On and on and on. If we don't have good line of sight in the next year, we're going to have to start degrading our capital program to make that last longer. So this is what DMV Moves is all about. We identified we basically need another 500 plus million. And if we could get that locked in and have that indexed, this organization would be probably the best funded transit organization in the country, and then should be held very accountable to deliver very documented results for the next, quite frankly, decades to deliver. And I think Metro would be more than willing to sign that piece of paper. I would, as the GM, to say, yep, over the next 10 to 20 years, here's what we're going to deliver with this funding. And so whether that's a kind of a contract with our state partners or whatever, theoretical aspect, but that's where it has to go. We need that funding resolved, and then we need to be held accountable to deliver that.
Brian, I saw you raise your placard there.
Thank you so much, Randy, for coming and speaking to us. And certainly over the past couple of months, as you mentioned, has been incredibly busy with Better Bus, ATO, you name it, implementing the service changes associated with the FY26 budget. It's really impressive the progress that the system has been able to make. So thank you so much for you and your staff in doing that. I don't want to beat a dead horse too much, but as an extension of what Solomon said, I believe it was a couple of meetings ago, I articulated, we need to avoid what happened last year at all costs. And I mean, the fact that the FY26 budget conversations were so easy was because the FY25 budget wasn't.
That's right.
An easy conversation. And fortunately, I think, a lot of us have probably listened to Tom and Yatende's presentation last week, and the actuals are looking favorable to the budget. And so that's great, and thank you so much for you and your team for, pulling the levers and leaning on them as necessary to make that happen. As you think about the FY26 budget, the FY27 budget, are there any levers that you're thinking about that you can pull or lean on to create a more sustainable operating budget, and one without kind of drastic service cuts or anything like that? And then as an extension of that, and this is something I've been curious about, not to get too specific, but is your office concerned about what the fare box recovery ratio is for the system? And I only ask that is because I know politically in the state I represent, Virginia, that is somewhat of a concern in the operating aspect of it. And I just want to make sure that we can kind of get ahead of the political stresses that naturally occur sometimes when it came to what happened last year and preventing that from happening. Yeah. But that's a specific example, just generally speaking for FY27 and moving forward.
Yeah, well, that's an entire happy hour conversation right there, Brian. But I think my short version of that, because obviously I think it is, you're recognizing the most important thing, which is we can make a lot of progress, but that progress could get ripped apart very quickly without the right resourcing to do it. And all you got to do is look at Philly right now or Chicago and realize that we are very fortunate. But this place we could have been Philly just like last year, right? But other parts are actually funding even higher levels. New York's right now getting incredible funding that they've dreamt of for a generation. Boston's good stuff happening. LA's got good, so these things come in waves, and we got to be real thoughtful that we need predictability. That's the really important thing. So I think you're hitting the right lens. We need to figure out what the right rotation of fare increases are. I don't know if it's 27, it might be 28. I think every 3 years having an inflation-adjusted fare is kind of fair, right? Every 3 years, if it went up a quarter, and by the way, we have a very, very good low-income program, MetroLift, that we never had before, which is fantastic. And we have a lot of other discounted programs with Kids Ride Free, seniors, disability, things of that nature. So that might be a lever, but again, that's going to bring in small. We're going to have to continue to be efficient. I will tell you, the automation conversation is a big deal. If you went to all over Europe or Asia, there's a reason and it's not just staff. I want to be clear. This isn't about let's automate to get rid of people. I don't even know if we would have a significant reduction in staff at all, maybe none. And you'd still save a lot of money because the system runs so much more efficiently. Energy management, reliability, how you use your fixed assets. It's really trying. So my entire focus with our leadership team, we want to run this place as business-like as possible while knowing it's not a business. Our P&L is community value. But we need to be thoughtful that every day, every dollar that we can save and do well with, I want to plow into, working with the board, more service. So if we can save $10 million, let's get $10 million more bus service. Right? And that's that thing. So we need to be incentivized at this organization. So let's say I was gone tomorrow. I'd say this just this way. We need the governance structure here to not be, hey, if you save 10 million, great. My subsidy goes to 2.95. No, that's the wrong answer. If we all agree 3% is the subsidy growth, good. Now, Randy, you and your team are incentivized to save so we can grow service. Because that is the most important thing for this region, period. If we want to grow our population, grow our economy, grow access to opportunity, it's about service. It always is in transit. And the bus area, to me, is the most important place that we can grow service. Because I think if you look where ridership has grown, it's all where we've added the best frequency and service, right? So I think, we need this DMV moves. I would encourage the RAC to be following that tightly, and that next fall, start leaning in to the elected officials, who, by the way, are fantastic. We got a great region of elected officials here. We got a good board, good elected officials, good congressional delegation, but they also have pressure points. Like, we got to be eyes wide open. This region right now is kind of on eggshells, not knowing what the economy is going to be like. Hopefully it'll be better than the dire forecast, but we're only one thing. People care about education, they care about healthcare, they care about bridges falling down, they care, in our world in this building, we're the only thing, but the reality is we're a big part of everybody else being successful. So I would encourage you to really watch that. We're gonna, this fall, as we start moving the budget process along, it's really gonna be about capital, and how do we manage to our operating correctly. Yep.
Alex?
On the DMV move side of things, we good?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
On the DMV move side of things, I was, for the RAC, I attended the Community Partners Advisory Meeting, which was a closed door last Friday.
Okay.
And the big takeaway from that, I kind of have my notes printed out, the yellow highlighted paper, if anyone has had the chance to read through that yet. But from how I understand it, I do think there is going to be funding committed to the capital. Like, there generally seems to be political consensus on getting funding committed to the capital side of things for, like, Metro Rail state of good repair, signaling system automation, that type of stuff. Where there is a lot more of a murky water situation is with the Regional Bus Priority Fund. And I'm a little skeptical of how committed we're going to be able to get our jurisdictional elected officials to a plan like that at this time, because that seems to be a little, what's the word? A little controversial, is they don't necessarily want to commit that amount of funding to it right now, which is unfortunate. I mean, it's good for the Metro Rail state of good repair, but for really expanding bus priority, I am a little concerned. We can dive more a little bit into that later. But also, thank you for.
Is that the question?
No, it's just
Okay.
kind of like a chime
Okay.
in. Like, it's.
Yeah. So listen, I would say on that, well, one, if you were at a closed meeting, I would respect the rules of the closed meeting.
Yeah.
That's the first thing I would do. But no, I wasn't there, so I get summaries of all these things. Listen, I would say you guys should be pushing for, and the advocates of this region should be pushing for the things that you think are important. That advocacy is what moves the needle, and you got to be specific and intentional about that. And if bus priority is what the RAC and a lot of customers, riders in the region want, should push for that. I think I'm way more hopeful than that. I actually think we're going to come together on an overall program. I think it's just easier to understand the capital stuff on the rail side versus the bus investment, and I think that's what's confusing. So I feel like it's more communications conflating. The other thing is, we run the rail system and no one else does. And people are having a hard time saying, well, I run bus and you run bus, and if we invested in that route or this street, what does that mean? Where if we were the only operator in the region, and again, I'm not here to I'm not playing that game. It'd be an easier conversation, but since it's all spread apart, everyone gets quickly into my taxes pay for this thing in my part. Plus, we have the regional system. So we're working on ways to try to reconcile that. How many corridors do we need to prioritize in the first amount of years, right? A good example is like George Ave. We need to move George Ave, and the district is really excited about that. We move 22,000 people a day on George Ave. That'd be a light rail line anywhere in America. I don't think we should build a light rail line there. Quite frankly, I have no interest. Light rail lines basically cost way too much to build in a lot of places right now. What we need, 60-foot buses, massive frequency, great full station BRT, let's get moving, right? Or versions of that. So I think we're going to be moving more bus stuff faster than people realize. I think we just got to get the plan in a place that it could be really understood by a variety of types of stakeholders that have to pay a bill. But also, don't take for granted that the state of good repair modernization is just going to happen. It's one thing for everyone to say that. Until the law and the money's there, it didn't happen. And a lot of people, even though they're great supporters of Metro, have a lot of other pressure points in a challenging economy.
No, I totally agree. Everyone is always has their local interest to cater to. And one, I think, pitch that we really need to take into consideration, and this is for everyone on the rack as we go forward, is like, if we don't spend the money and make a good plan now, we are going to pay for it even more later. Because like, if we don't
Way more.
Yeah, if we don't invest in bus priority, buses are going to get slower because there's more traffic, and then service costs more. We cut service or both, or
You got it.
yep. And same with the rail side, like just like the signaling system, like it needs modernization. So I just think that's the big takeaway from that.
Yep.
One other thing I have to ask as well is on the digitalization side. I'm really excited to see that you guys are pursuing more of that. I wanted to see, because particularly on the bus side of things today, when there's bus detours and service disruptions, it's very difficult on the digital side of things to kind of sometimes see what those changes are. Like if there's a street closure for a festival, or like missing trips or stuff like that. Are you guys potentially working on any improvements for stuff like that? I will say specific, like around the U.S., I've seen a recent partnership between Transit and I believe the company is Swiftly to kind of actually show the
We use
routes on
Swiftly.
apps.
It's one of our tools we use. Clever is a big tool. So we have detour information now. One of the detour elements is working through our system now, but it's one of the things the team is refining. Listen, and I know we got to move to the other way. One of the large challenges we have, especially in the district, is just the amount of street impacts that are kind of shortening. Like a motorcade messes up. A motorcade at 4:30 on a Tuesday, the network's gone for 2 hours. That's how it works. It takes us 2 hours to recover from 15 minutes of that because you so many intersections in a row messed up. We're not getting the White House to change how they're going to do their thing, right? Yeah. So what we're trying to do is how to get that information. And people go, well, it says delay. How long is it going to take? We don't necessarily know, right? Crashes impacts things, other police or fire movements, utilities, right? Sometimes they go out and do utility work without even coordinating. Sometimes they do that without DDOT even knowing. Right, because there's emergency things and other things. So it's just a lot of stuff. But that, again, back to the focus. Once this network is re-baselined, which we've done, we have an entire team focused on the next element of Better Bus, which is how to deliver the service at a higher level. So huge focus on bus coming up.
No, that's great to hear. Thank you.
Randy, do you have time for a really fast picture?
Well, look, I can do
two
a
more
couple more questions.
questions.
Yeah. Shantia's trying to get me, but I give long answers too, so that's.
Hendy.
Hi, Randy. Thank you so much for being here. I follow you on Twitter. I love all your posts, so I'm so excited you're here. My question is about the Better Bus network and its reception on social media. So unfortunately, I think I've been seeing a lot of misinformation being spread about the Better
On
Bus.
social media? Really?
Yeah, like on TikTok. I know you're very active on.
I don't do
social media.
TikTok.
Yeah, but on TikTok especially, like I've seen videos with about like 300,000 views, 400,000 views, saying, oh, the 33 bus is gone, the L2 bus is gone, and I've been trying to like reply to every comment saying, no,
Oh,
it's
well,
not
that's
gone.
very kind of you. Thank you.
Being like they're just renamed to something else, and that yes, some stops are removed, but that it's they're not just removed randomly, they're research-based, but I don't think people know that. And I know like the WMATA TikTok account also posts like TikToks about it, but I think there should be more of an effort to interact with other TikToks like this and responding, because many people have very negative reactions about this and are like, we weren't told about this, even though I know there's been many meetings and outreach about it. But I think maybe there needs to be more of a social media push. And so what are does WMATA have a plan on like social media to interact with posts like this, or any other way to reach out to people who haven't who don't know about the actual changes?
Sure. Well, first, thank you, Eddie, for doing the TikTok replies. I'll check with the team about our responsiveness on TikTok. My gut is that we're using TikTok only for more corporate push. We also got to be careful. We don't want to drive social media into never-ending response cycle. So that's why we really put this chat feature inside MetroPulse. And you're going to see a lot more. Every time someone says something on Twitter, we're going to be like, hey, go to MetroPulse. We want to get the conversations off of social media because they're not really conducive to the individual's experience. So like a bunch of other people are like, I don't even know what they're talking about, or there wasn't a delay on the Blue Line. My trip was fine, and this thing, right? So we're trying to get a little more, and so we can have better customer service. So we do an incredible amount of responsiveness on Twitter. Reddit's pretty good. Reddit is probably the #1 place we're getting feedback related to the network redesign. And it's a little bit more thoughtful on Reddit. Not always, but a little bit more. Yeah. And people like legitimately going, this is working, this isn't. I said really publicly, there's no way we were going to do this and not have any mistakes. It looks like we haven't had any like massive mistakes. We've had, a few dozen little things. Now, little to the certain person is massive to them. Most all of it is, I'm just confused. But if you take, I don't know, we'll look at the sign here. If you take the P14, after the first day or the second day, you're going to be good. And like so, you probably have seen we have people everywhere out on the system. And so we're trying hard on that. We're trying hard on social, as Bill mentioned, paper. We've tried to hit everybody. We really concentrated on going, especially to places where seniors are, because they might have the most complication. Like I look around this room, not to be ageist, but my gut is most people here are pretty digitally connected, with their phones and social media. So probably very able to get information. We want to go to people that usually don't get heard from, different languages, elder, seniors, things of that nature. So overall, and we're monitoring it every day, including myself. So like last night, I'm going back and forth with people on a Reddit thing. What about this? Yeah, we missed that sign. That caused that confusion. We have a few that are doing limited stops on the same routes. We're doing locals. We might okay, how do we message that a little bit better and how the operators convey that? So, what we want to do is hear that. So if the RAC could think through, and timing of urgency is a big deal here, if you could send us a list of all of the things that you've heard on Better Bus, that would be real helpful. And then, John, if we can get that over to like Leroy, Allison, Peter, those are the things that we just need to hear about, right? I think overall the thing's going pretty well. Like the general feel here. So I did one of these in Austin. I led Network Redesign in Austin. Peter led one in part of New York. So we've had a lot of experience with people on the team in other places. We're feeling pretty good about the overall effort. We only had like 5 operators off route, I think, in 2 days, and 4 of the 5 were in non-revenue going to the route. That's pretty incredible with thousands of operators. So, few signs here and there, maybe a dozen or half a dozen more than that signs. So overall good, but please give us that feedback. The next correction will be December. When we do the new pick, we're going to have some runtime issues. There's no getting around it. And the other thing is we have runtime issues in the summer anyway, because has anyone noticed in the last week, like the whole city just feels empty? Right? Like it's unbelievable. I was at DuPont yesterday and it was like there was nobody. So the buses are flying, right? You get back into schools back, same street, full of traffic. And it's very hard to adjust to that nuance. So long way of saying, please just give us more feedback. Mr. Chair, do you got a question?
No, well, I think everyone has been asking really great questions. I've crossed all mine off the list.
Okay.
Matthew.
Really quick, thanks, Randy, for spending the time to come with us this evening. I guess my question is more about the workforce. I know you spend a lot of time with customer-facing staff and members of it. You're in the organizations in this pattern where you want to be as modern of an organization, a world-class global transit organization as much as possible. Do you feel like you have from a 30,000-foot view, right? You have that workforce in place now, or is that a issue that you want to kind of look at and grow the workforce, make sure they're more modern and kind of keeping up with the times as we forge ahead?
Yeah, that is an awesome question, man. Like a really thoughtful, good question. Really appreciate that. We are a people-driven organization. So as many trains we got and buses and access vehicles and signals and whatever else, at the end of the day, we need really good people. We need people committed to this mission, people that care about service. So where I would say the 30,000 foot, best transit organization, so I've worked at 3 transit organizations, and both very good. The level of quality of staff here is, and I've probably been to 150 transit agencies around the world. The only places that I would say could be, that maybe would be like Tokyo, Singapore, Hong Kong. The challenge there is, one, like you get into a place, that's your whole career. You don't move. Like you're on an island. That's what you do. So there's a little different thing there. There's also a cultural thing in transit at those kind of markets that is just, it's not an American thing. But take that little nuance. This place has talent through the incredible and deep in a lot of areas. Maybe not every area, but deep in a lot of areas. Where I think we're trying to focus is how do we upskill the staff in a very fast evolving world. And a good example of that is these digital tools, like station managers having those tablets. They are all doing their thing. Listen, I got station managers that work for us. They run a side business on the side on TikTok. And so I got here, I'm like, guys, don't worry. They know what they're doing. Let's give them the device, interact with them. Treat them like the adults they are, right? Instead of just being pure procedural. We do have to upskill, I think, our technical side on rail vehicles, bus vehicles, and signaling and things like that, because these are basically just rolling computers, right? So yeah, you gotta look after trucks and wheels and suspension, but the information on those vehicles. And so I think this has been this paradigm change. Has this group interacted with Judd at all? Maybe we could line that up at some point. Judd so Judd is our chief of digital transformation, digital modernization. And when I got here, IT didn't work for the general manager. It was buried kind of in the organization. I was like, whoa. Like, to me, tech is like fundamental. It's everything for us. I say we're a tech company that just moves people. And not a tech company like, like I put an app together and I'm selling crypto in my basement or something. I'm talking like a real tech company, right? And Judd, he was the head of tech at Georgetown. He was at U.S. Marshals. He is fundamentally transforming this organization. He is fantastic. He's a leader. We have a whole digital roadmap over multiple years, how we're trying to attack every type of area in the organization, from back-of-house systems to front-of-house systems. We also got a major cyber digital presence for us, National Capital Transit System. We have a big concern about that and how we manage that. I think, John, getting Judd here at some point, if his availability, if you're all interested, would be really good so you could philosophically and some tangible elements of how we're moving that forward. So I think the workforce, good. We need to be thoughtful of what the workforce is going to look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Meet them where they are. Change is real hard, right, for a lot of people. I personally love change. Change is what makes, I'm an excited person about change. Not everyone is like that. You move my cheese, I get upset. So we need to be empathetic. We need to be respectful. A lot of people have put in a lot of years at this place with a lot of hard work. Just because the world's changing doesn't mean they're getting thrown away. If anything, we need to figure out how to invest in them. But we also need employees with an open mind. And they have to, come to reality that this thing's moving fast. And we need them to, my whole thing is, I want heart. If you have heart, we'll figure out everything else. But you have to come to work, and I'll use the acronym so I won't say the word. You have to have gas. And if you do that, we are going to back you all the way. You see customers, you got to go help them. That's our number one job, helping people use this system, right? There are other members of our community that need us, and if you have that service attitude, you're here forever, and let's make it work. So, long way. There's a lot of layers to that, so I really like that question. I've had very little people outside of like certain roles ask that kind of question. You might be the first customer kind of advocate person, so I think that I really appreciate asking that. It was good.
All right, I think we've taken a lot of your time, so we appreciate you
Thanks for
staying
letting me hang out
longer.
with you all for a little bit.
You're welcome
Yeah,
anytime.
that was fun. Yeah. I love it, right?
Yeah, let's do a quick picture.
Oh, okay, yeah, let's do it.
How about everyone right?
All right. Thanks, y'all, for some really great questions. And thank you again to Randy. I know he's not in here anymore, but for staying long. I know staff was in the back texting, like, we got to go. But now we're going to move into a public safety update. Another star of Metro. The chief is here. So we can't get anyone who's more informed about safety around the system. So, Chief, I'll hand it over to you.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks, Chair Stout. That was kind of you. I don't think I'm much of a star, but for an old guy, I guess I'm doing okay since I'm still working, so this isn't too bad. So, the good news is that, we've continued our downward trend with crime from last year, 2024. So to date, we're down 38% in crime, and then our 2-year total from 2023, which was one of our higher years, we're down 55%. So, I think, there's a lot of things at work. There's not one thing that drives down crime. It's a bunch of different things. When you look at your deployment, you look at your crime, and, I think I've told, the council before, there's a problem-oriented policing model that we use. It's been around since 1978. I first came across it when I was a police officer with the Metropolitan Police in a district. It worked back then, back in the 80s and into the 90s. We started seeing more significant decreases, and it's working here as well. With the men and women of the police department, and the detectives, they do a fantastic job day in and day out. So really the credit goes to them for the crime decreases. So, yeah, sure. So, our numbers, our enforcement is up, but it's not all about enforcement. We've created a community services bureau about 2 years ago. Ms. Lewis, Director Shonda Lewis, she runs it. We do at least 2 community outreach events a week, and then we do probably a little over 700 total a year, where we go out to the community and we actually do outreach. We also have a youth advisory council. We started out with about 15 kids, and prior to school getting out, I think our last meeting we had 115 kids that come out, so that's grown as well. We did start a cadet program for young adults that have just graduated from high school, and because you can't become a police officer until you're 20 and a half. So the cadet program gives us an opportunity to hire 18-year-olds, bring them in, and we've worked out an agreement with Prince George's Community College. We're trying to work out an agreement with UDC as well and Northern Virginia, where while they're working for us, they can go to school, and while they're going to school, when they come on the police department, they'll have at least an associate's degree. So it's a good program. It gets us some kids that maybe aren't looking at being a police officer as a career, but get them in the door, kind of expose them. They work for us, but not as police officers. They get exposed to the police department, kind of understand how it works, and at the same time they go to school as well. So, and then when they turn 20 and a half, they turn over and become police officers. So that's a program we just started end of last year and into this year. So we've got 5 total now that are working their way through the program. Additionally, we just ended the fiscal year, so looking at crime, we're down about 40%. Well, actually 43% for the fiscal year, because we look at it both ways. We look at fiscal year, which a lot of people use, particularly for budgetary times. But we also follow, it's the old UCR for the FBI, but it's called NIBRS now, National Incident-Based Reporting System, and it's a uniform crime reporting system that's used across the country. Most law enforcement agencies participate. So they use a calendar year, so we're reporting numbers at least twice a year. So for the fiscal year, we're down 43% in crime, and the number I gave you at the beginning was year-to-date from January 1 to present versus January 1 to this point of last year, and that's a couple of comparisons that we have to do. Additionally, our clearance rates, those are the rates where we solve cases that are open, and that's mainly detectives and our officers as well. So we're well above the national averages. So if you look at, for instance, rape, our clearance rate is 100%. The national average is 26%. Robbery, our clearance rate is 58%. The national average is 27%. Aggravated assault, the clearance rate for us was 75% for the fiscal year, and nationally it's 46%. And then theft, it's 25%, what we did for the fiscal year. Nationally, it's 15%. And then arson, we closed 66% of the cases during the fiscal year, and nationally, it's a 26% clearance rate. So, you know, our clearance rates are well above, and a lot of that has to do with a lot of the coordination we do with our camera system. You know, we have cameras all over the place, particularly, you know, in our train stations and in garages and, you know, on our properties. And then the officers have body-worn cameras. And then we get a lot of camera footage from witnesses, you know, that they turn over to us, you know, to help us with the case. And we try to be as nimble as possible, and we use that camera footage, you know, for an instance, you know, we had an assault. I'll just give you an example. We have a Metro Integrated Command System. We have a police lieutenant that works up there during, you know, open and close of the system. And we also have a video unit that works up there. So, and all the officers get issued cell phones. So like yesterday, we had a person assaulted at Friendship Heights Metro. The officer was able to get on the scene. The video people were able to put out a video image. They found the assault on camera, put out a video image, and then some of the officers that were working the upper red line were able to intercept the suspect at medical center and arrest that person. So without that, you know, that would have probably been somebody that would have probably got away, you know, and then we would have had the investigation. But we're trying to get more real time with our video, and that way at least a quicker apprehensions. And it's not only about the apprehension. So when you actually get somebody close in time to a crime, then you actually still have, you know, witnesses or the complaining witness. And, you know, there's a lot of research about eyewitness identification. I went through this years ago with Gary Wells and a whole bunch of other people. But anyway, the closer in time, and it's just common sense, the closer in time a crime happens and you have a witness or a complainant that can make an ID, that's the ideal time, you know, because, you know, with time, you know, obviously all of our memories kind of fade. So it speeds up not only the apprehension, but also the identification of the suspect by the witness and everything else, which in turn translates into a stronger case when you have to go to court, you know. So, and that's what we're really looking for. When we make it doesn't just stop with the arrest. We're looking to prosecute this individual in court, you know, and we have to have, you know, good evidence to present to the court, you know, withstand that scrutiny, and then, you know, to a jury ultimately and a judge to decide. So all that, you know, long way of saying that, I think, you know, because of the camera system, because of the speed of it, I think we're making, you know, really good cases that are court-worthy to go. So, you know, a couple other things that we've done, and, you know, thanks to the board for all their support, and Mr. Clark as well, he's really moved the needle on, you know, the safety of Metro. The board just recently instituted a banning process. So individuals that are arrested for assaulting, you know, a patron, an employee, you know, can be banned for, you know, the initial ban is 45 days, then 90, then 365 days. And then people that are arrested for any type of sexual offense, they're banned, you know, same thing, 45, 90, and 65 days. The reason why that's important, you know, and I don't know if I brought it up to the council, but, you know, so we can go through the court system and get a stay-away order for the person, but because we police in Maryland, DC, and Virginia, so if you get a stay-away order in the district, they can only stay, it's only enforceable in the district. They can't enforce it in Maryland or Virginia. So, and same with Maryland. So if you get a stay-away order in Maryland, you can't enforce that stay-away order if they're riding in the district or in Virginia. And we have people that daily cross, you know, all three jurisdictions. You know, so the banning has helped us. I mean, it's still early. We started June 2nd, but we've already banned, you know, 64 individuals, you know. It wasn't just like, these are assaults with weapons, 9 sexual assault offenses, you know, so we don't really ban a whole lot of juveniles because they really don't engage in that type of behavior. We have banned 10 juveniles so far, but those were all assaults that involved a weapon, So, you know, if you use the web, and there's an appeal process too, the board had set up, rightly so, and, you know, the person who is banned, or, you know, like in the case of a juvenile, you know, their parents can go through this appeal process, and there's an outside arbiter that looks at this and makes the decisions based on, you know, what the tariff says and, you know, the circumstances of the ban. So far, you know, we have the numbers, you know, we just have to see, you know, the effect of it. It's only been a month, so, you know, we're still, you know, analyzing it and seeing how effective, you know, that is. Really, you know, I'll open it up if anybody's got any questions, you know, of me or, you know, anything I can, you know, try to answer for you.
Thanks, Chief. I think I have a question, which is picking up right where you left off with the banning from the system. How do you enforce their access to the system?
Well, it's a good question, but it's a question that, so there's a lot of, well, one, I'll tell you how it works. So we have a banning list, and we have the individual's photos on that list, and that goes to our communications division, and then the officers get the list every day. And so if they come across a person that's banned, you know, based on the photo, they have the authority and the constitutional authority to stop them. And then what we do is we look at the photo, but then we also run the identifying information through our communication system to ensure that is the person that we banned previously, and then they can be rearrested for trespassing. The other thing is, you'd be surprised at how many people actually now use their smart trip cards. You know, there was some debate about turning them off, and I was like, don't turn them off. You know, as soon as they hit on that smart trip card, then we know they're in the system, and then we can go after them that way as well. You know, so, yeah, but some people are like, oh, I'll turn it off, revoke them. No, let's let them use it, and then we'll catch them and arrest them again.
Thank you. I think, Matt, and then.
Thanks, Chief, for coming tonight. Appreciate it. I guess I had a couple questions, but I just want to say, like, as a lifelong rider since a young child on the Metro system, this is the safest I've ever felt using it, so great job to you.
No, it's really the officers and like Mr. Clark and the board, they really.
You can
respond.
feel it.
And
It's
for the
a
riders
real
too. I
difference.
mean, we get a lot of help from our riders, you know. I mean, they're willing witnesses, which, you know, is a rarity, you know, these days, but they really do care about the system.
The two questions I had, one was, from like a proactive policing standpoint, I guess philosophically, where do you stand? Like, are you in support of like specialized units and being aggressive in the pursuit and prevention of crime within the system? And the other thing, we do have, the second question is, we do have overlapping jurisdictions, Maryland, the district, and Virginia. How is Metro handling, I guess, the concealed carry issue? Are weapons like firearms allowed in the system during use? Like if you're a Virginia firearm holder, if you're Maryland concealed carry permit holder, are you allowed to have that firearm on your person in the station? And how is that being kind of managed by your organization?
Yeah, so to answer your first question, so sort of going back to, you know, I've seen policing evolve over the years, and like I said, it's not one thing. We do have units that we have a plainclothes unit. You know, we do have a traditional police units, but they don't operate in silo, they work in tandem. So when we usually deploy plainclothes, we look at, you know, based on our problem-oriented policing philosophy. So I don't want to get too far involved in this. I don't know if that's probably bore you all to death. But anyways, so problem-oriented policing is a guy named Herman Goldstein came up with it back in the 70s. And it's a pretty simple problem-solving model. They call it a SARA model. So if you have a problem, you know, what you're supposed to do is work with, you know, the stakeholders, you know. But Metro being transit, it's a little bit different. So it's a basic problem-solving model. So you scan for the problem, you know, you do an analysis, and then you respond with, you know, resources, and then you do an assessment. And this is just a process that goes on and on. But with crime, you know, what they found, and it's true, you know, so they call it a crime triangle. So each side of the crime triangle, if the police can influence one of those sides of the crime triangle, then you don't have a crime. So what do you need to have a crime, right? Victim, offender, and location. So if you concentrate depending on the crime, like, so a common one is, theft from auto. How often do you catch somebody for theft from auto? It's rare, I mean, unless you're there at the time that it happens. So what do? So then you look at the location. Well, what's wrong? Is there lighting? Is it accessible? Are people going through there regularly? And then you also look at victims too. You'd be surprised at how many people don't lock their cars. I mean, then they still don't lock their cars. So, and there's an information campaign. So what you try to do in that particular case, yeah, you want to go after the offenders, but you're really trying to influence the location and the victims. So if you educate and you influence, those, like the location, better lighting, camera, whatever, then you see your crimes drop off. And you can apply it to assaults, burglaries, homicide. I mean, it's pretty applicable. I mean, it's not the panacea, but it does work. So with that, we use crime data to see if we actually have a problem where we think plainclothes officers would be of assistance. They're usually pretty good, like around robberies or random assaults, or if you have a pattern crime, then you can use plainclothes officers. Because most of the time, if you have a uniform officer, and we use them a lot, uniform officers are, one, to catch somebody in the act, but really they're there for prevention. Because, this goes back years, but, if there's a uniform officer, the likelihood of a person committing a crime is pretty low. I mean, some people still do, but generally it's pretty low, Same thing with use of force. I mean, get into a whole bunch of different things. Use of force for police officers, and that's why I like to put the officers out in pairs, because use of force goes way down if it's more than one officer on the scene. People are compliant because there's two of them, so you don't have to use force, and that's how you cut down on your citizens' complaints and your uses of force as well. And it has a big impact. So those are some of the things that, we've tried to implement, with the transit police. And then to your question on the concealed carry, so in Virginia, it's legal. In the District of Columbia, it's in Title VII, you cannot bring a firearm onto WMATA property or a rail car or a bus. It's written in the DC code. People think Metro did it, but we didn't. The DC Council was the one that enacted that. And then Maryland, we follow their laws as well. If somebody has legally a concealed carry permit, we can stop that person, but if they have the permit, then they're allowed to proceed. But if you come into the district, whether you have a permit in Virginia or Maryland, and you ride Metro, it's illegal, you get arrested for it. There are people they'll probably take that to the Supreme Court. I was here for Heller, and in a different capacity, I was with the DC police and went through that whole thing, and, they have a powerful legal lobby,
I think I had Brandon next, and then Eli.
Thank you, Chief, for taking the time to speak with us. I appreciate it. I also have two questions, but hopefully they're a little bit on the quicker side. The first question is surrounding some reporting, I guess, from local community organizations noting that U.S. Park Police has been in metro stations, arresting certain individuals for lower level offenses and then transferring them to ICE, or Immigration and Customs Enforcement. I was wondering if you were aware of any current relationships that MTPD has, either directly with federal immigration authorities and or other federal government agencies that are doing that kind of policing, because I think as a result of these arrests, there probably are some members undocumented in the community who may not be as inclined to ride the system as a result of some of this reporting. The second question I have is surrounding, I guess, other tactics, to address potential issues that have traditionally been thought of as like safety-driven, police-driven approaches to crime. There are folks who undergo mental health crises on buses, on trains, and right now I think a lot of the reporting mechanisms tend to be to text the MTPD line and maybe an MTPD officer will board that train or board that bus. But are there any plans that you know of on your end to potentially pursue partnerships with community organizations that have trained mental health professionals or social workers who could support Metro and MTPD specifically in those instances?
No, both good questions, and I got your message. You want me to cut down on my answers because I'm a little long-winded sometimes, so I understand that. Yeah, that was pretty slick. I like that, you know? So, yeah, I would say that's a false report about the Park Police. So we do partner with the Park Police along with the DC Police, TSA, the FBI, the ATF, the DEA, the U.S. Marshals, but they have not come on the Metro trying to do an ICE roundup or anything like that. The other thing, too, the guidance that we've given, we have to comply with all the laws in the local jurisdictions, so we do not enforce administrative immigration detainers, and the reason why we don't is because we don't have any authority to do that. That's a federal enforcement effort. So even if I said, yeah, go out and enforce we would be in violation of the law, so we can't do that. Now, if there's an actual warrant for somebody, that's obtained by a federal agency where a judge has signed off on it, it's a criminal warrant, and we run across that person, they will be arrested because we have to comply with the court's order that we have to take that person in custody. And that's regardless. You can't just say, we're not going to arrest this person on that warrant because we don't like it. It doesn't work that way. If it's signed by a judge and it's a warrant that's issued in the system, then we as police officers, based on our oath to the Constitution, we have to enforce that court order. So, there are agencies that do work with ICE. I have talked with the regional folks here with Immigration and Customs Enforcement. They haven't told me about any plans or anything like that of, coming on Metro looking for people. I get questions like that all the time. They're like, well, what if ICE comes in, looking for people? It's like, well, as long as they're where the public, wherever the public can go, so can a police officer or an ICE official or anybody else, can't impede their, their progress. But, by the same token, though, too, if ICE is arresting somebody or taking somebody into custody on the street, and then that person in turn starts to assault, the federal officer, then we have a duty to assist that federal officer because then they've committed a crime, and then we have a duty to intervene. I mean, that's just the way it works. And then your second question was about people with mental health crisis or drugs. So we do have a team, a crisis intervention team. They're all clinicians. They've been trained in intervening for folks that are, suffering from mental health crisis, drug addiction, or homelessness that we see out here on the system. Probably a longer conversation, but some of you know. So we work with Maryland, D.C., and Virginia. When we do come across these folks, we offer services. Sometimes they take them, sometimes they don't. One of the reasons why a lot of people don't take services is because they don't want to go into a shelter. And the reason why they don't want to go into shelter is because they want to continue to, do drugs, drink, do whatever they want to. When you go into these shelters, there's rules that they have to abide by, and they don't want to. And some of them have mental health problems, but, unless they're a danger to themselves or others, there's nothing legally we can do with them. But we work with, so the problem with all of this, in my view, and it's just my opinion, and I'm probably not speaking for Metro on this, but, the whole piece is like the district you work with, they have the Department of Behavioral Health, it's a government agency that you can work with. When you get out into Maryland and Virginia, there's a patchwork of some government agencies, and then there's a lot of non-government agencies, NGOs. It's not well coordinated throughout the region, in my opinion. So if you run into Mike Anzello, I'm having a crisis in the district will figure out who Mike Anzello is and maybe offer services. But then, I go out to Maryland, somebody else runs into Mike Anzello. They don't know what services I got in place in the district, and then the NGO's trying to look for services. And then, let's say a couple of days later, I got to Virginia, and it's the same type of thing, over and over again. So it's not well coordinated, I guess, is the bottom line, in my opinion. I don't speak for Metro on that. That's just my observations.
Eli.
Thank you, and appreciate you taking the time to be here today. So my question was a little bit about fare enforcement and the current campaign, I would say, I guess, that's going on. I've heard it described by Randy Clark as kind of a carrot and stick approach, with, of course, the stick being the police side of things. Unfortunately, I think that as a community members and what I've been hearing from a lot of people, we're really only seeing the stick, and the carrot part is just kind of a baby carrot that no one really knows where it is. One big example that I've heard of recently was the rumor that ICE was on a bus in Silver Spring a few weeks ago, and it turned out it was fare enforcement by plainclothes MTVD officers. And that is creating like a big perception of some of the things that were said here about, you know, is it safe for me to go on Metro? And of course, there's the public safety side, but is it safe for me and accessible for me to use this service? Or am I like at fear that someone's gonna come for me, either for fare enforcement, for immigration, of things of that nature? So just the concern about using this really like force to do fare enforcement rather than kind of encouraging folks or meeting people where they are, or doing other things to you know, make the system better for everyone, because the point of this service is to get everyone around. So yeah.
No, I appreciate the question. So, yeah, I mean, even when we started the Ramp Up Forward Fest, I mean, we did this months-long public service campaign that you're going to have to pay your fare. It's flashed on buses. You got to pay your fare. I mean, we've gone out and, you know, I disagree with you a little bit where you say that there hasn't been much going on. We've done, prior to doing enforcement, you know, we have a reduced fare program that we've put out into the public numerous times. You know, so at some point, you know, people have to pay their fare. It's not free, you know, and, you know, it'd be great in a perfect world that you could run a free transportation system, but all this stuff costs money, you know, and some of it comes from fares, you know. I mean, and that's a local government decision. That's really not a Metro decision. You know, it's just the way they're set up. No, I'm sorry. Yes,
Chief, maybe you could just backtrack, because some of our members are new.
Oh, okay.
And we're not here when we did the campaign and the warnings.
Yep.
Before we started issuing tickets and enforcement. So can you just like fill in that?
Yeah,
blank?
yeah. So when we started it, you know, a few years ago, and then, you know, so we did this whole campaign for months, you know, and we gave people warnings. We issued these warning notices. Hey, you're going to have to pay your fare. We put it out, socialized it on social media, through the media. And we did. We had a long, several-month period where we warned people that, hey, you know, you have to pay your fare, you have to pay your fare. The other thing we did, too, is that, you know, we did roll out the reduced fare program. You know, we had people out there that people could sign up, you know, if they qualified for reduced fare. So we did do, you know, what I'd say is a lot of public notice and, you know, advertisement that in order to ride the bus or rail, you're going to have to pay your fare. And then when people don't comply with it, they don't get arrested, they get issued a citation. It's when they don't cooperate with the citation is what leads to their arrest. So out of the 10,000 fare evasion citations we've issued this year, you know, roughly about 7% of people don't cooperate and they get arrested. So the vast majority of people do cooperate and they get a citation. It's just those 7% that don't want to cooperate and they do get arrested. And that's the law in Virginia, Maryland, and the district as well. You know, the other thing I'll say too is that, you know, and you know, you can probably see a bunch of studies, you know, that are out there, but, you know, what we found and what most transit agencies find is that, you know, and Mr. Clark has said this, you know, not everybody that fare evades is a criminal. But when we looked at our violent crimes, every 97.5% of the people who committed violent crimes on Metro, how did they get into the system? They fare evaded. So when you start doing fare enforcement, it also leads to a reduction in your violent crime as well.
I think, too, when we look at our annual report, the last couple of years, fare evasion has been one of the top issues for riders, and they don't like to see it. So I think it's finding the right balance, I think, to what you both are saying and what Chief's saying, is finding the right balance between enforcement and then I think, too, sometimes things get put on social media, especially these last few months, that just the rumor mill starts churning that happens online, I think we're all familiar with.
Yeah, Randy alluded to this, and the chief alluded to the Metro Lift program, which is half price for families, individuals and families on SNAP. And we're working closely to continue to make sure people know about that, can enroll in it. And so if you all are working, with organizations or with your neighbors, just make sure folks know about it. I actually think I have some Lyft brochures, so I'll put them out on the table. But it's really easy to sign up, and you get a fare card, you get half price off of your fare. So that's also another opportunity to talk about, yeah, you have to pay the fare, but, you might be eligible for a half price option.
All right, I've got Brian next, and we'll pop back to you unless you want to wrap up this. Yeah, really quick.
So sorry, I think one part I left out of it was really about building trust, and a lot of, I think, these fare evasion things are reducing the trust in our system, and I think what we're seeing is a lot with the federal immigration things and policing around the country is a reduction of trust. I know there are these great programs. I know that's not necessarily your role house, but just a lot of this has been diminishing of the trust and seeing if you're going to just get a ticket, people are not trusting the system, and they're not trusting the other ways to go through things if they're just seeing that they're going to be met with, someone with a gun at the fare stall. So I think there should be a real big consideration of how MTPD's using, force in these things and how that's impacting the trust with the system and with the state at all.
No, I appreciate that. So we don't use force that much, to be honest with you, when you look at our stats. But there is a uniformed police officer, and, they do have to enforce the law. I disagree with you on the trust thing. I think we've built a lot of trust, particularly with our outreach events. Just recently, National Gun Awareness Day. A few weeks ago, we do an annual, we go to Anacostia quite a bit, but we do an annual public outreach there, and, we have probably over 400 people from the community come out and, and join us, for, that Gun Awareness Day. And we do events all over the city. We do a back-to-school event every year up at Fort Totten, where, we get about 2,000 to 3,000 people that come out, and we give the kids, free backpacks and giveaways. And, so I think, there probably is a certain segment that doesn't trust us, but I think we've worked really hard to try to, help the community, and, and that's really what our purpose is. We're here to help more than anything else, but we also have to enforce the law. And I don't think anybody, maybe somebody will come up with a different story, but I've been doing this for 38 years. I haven't seen anybody come up with anything different. So we'll just have to agree to disagree on that part.
I think we're going to go to Brian for our last question, so we do need to we have some other items on our agenda that are going to take the rest of the time. I want to make sure we're out of here at 8.
Most definitely. Thank you so much, Chief Inzala, for coming. I think you've been to a RAC meeting every single year since you became chief, I think. So I appreciate your office's work and, coming to the council and speaking with us. I greatly appreciate it. For the Cherry Blossom Festival, I got off at Smithsonian, and one of the very first people I saw when the doors opened was Brian Dwyer and one of your officers, also in white, coordinating the crowd. And I was amazed at that high level of leadership in the station, actively coordinating what was a very hectic and busy period. So part of this is a comment in showing, thank you in your office for actively doing that, while also recognizing that, the Metro serves a lot of these very large events, sports, concerts, political, whatever, cultural, whatever it may be. There's a lot of people flowing through a lot of places in our system, and your office kind of also, in your department, has a kind of proactive aspect in ensuring safety during those periods. Can you just talk a little bit about kind of how you view, whether it be crowd control, orderly management of people within our system, some of those things that aren't directly related to crime, but still create a sense of public safety and an actual, safe environment in our system?
No, and thanks. Yeah, that was Deputy Chief Bone that was out there, and, you know, he's a good police leader, and there's a lot of them. So, you know, when we do major events, we coordinate with all our partners in the National Capital Region area. A lot goes into it, particularly events downtown. So it's, you know, Metropolitan Police, they're the biggest police departments in the area. And generally, it's U.S. Park Service, Secret Service, FBI. We get a lot of intelligence streams from Military District of Washington as well. You know, and then we work with our outlying partners, Fairfax, Alexander, Arlington, Montgomery County, Prince George's County, Maryland State Police, and the Virginia State Police. So we all work together, and we try to coordinate these plans because, you know, one thing about public transportation, you know, rail and bus in particular, you know, to get into our system, there is no metal detector. So terrorism is always a concern for us. If you have metal detectors, I don't know how public transportation would work because, you know, it's not an airport. It would take a lot of time, and then people would be like, well, I'm not going to use this thing because it takes too much time. So we have to balance that as well. I know several years ago, you know, Metro tried to incorporate like bag checks, you know, and that just didn't go very well because it slows people down. You know, that's the whole thing. So what we do, we plan for it, and then what we do is we put together what we call detail orders. And so there's a high-ranking official at most of the stations where we think we're going to have the largest crowds. And then there's a complement of officers there as well. And we coordinate with the station manager as well as the rail personnel to try, and the bus supervisors, to try to make sure that there's an orderly flow and get people moving. And then the police, we try to assist with the crowd management as well, but are also looking at indicators of, you know, either lone wolves or terrorism or, you know, that sort of thing, based on the intelligence and some of the training that we get. There's a whole lot of other planning that goes into it. You know, we are a member of JHAT, as well as, you know, a couple of these other, what they call a SWAT working group, where we share resources throughout the region with federal and local agencies, and just in case we do have that response where biggest, you know, threat that I've seen, you know, over the years, everybody always talks about, you know, terrorist bombing, that is a concern, but it's really an active shooter. That's the biggest threat on public transit. You know, and even if it's just one person with a gun, you know, the devastation is horrible. So we try to prepare for those contingencies as well. You know, the other thing that we've done, we've stood up what we call a civil disturbance unit. We've got about 150 officers that are trained in that. And that's really dealing with any type of, you know, mass protest, demonstration, but it also is for crowd management as well, you know. So, like, sometimes, really hasn't happened with us, thank goodness, but sometimes years ago when I was with another agency, we did have people that wanted to confront other people at the same location. So what we do with civil disturbance, we send, you know, a line of officers between them, and then we just kind of walk them out from there, so we keep them separated. There's a whole tactic and training where you can do that safely. It's not about using a lot of force. It's just about movements of resources to where you can keep both sides so they can exercise their First Amendment, you know, right to do that. So there's a lot of planning that goes into it. There's a lot of coordination with it. Even though January 6th, as horrible as it was, but if it wasn't for the Metropolitan Police Department and all these other jurisdictions that went up to help the Capitol Police, that would have turned out to be a lot worse than it was.
Well, thank you, Chief, for taking the time to be here. We appreciate it, and I think the continued updates, we appreciate you being here multiple times since I've been in the RAC, to what Brian was saying. I think it's always great to hear from the leaders of Metro. And I know if there's more questions, I'm sure the Chief and his team would be happy to answer those, but let's just send those in writing, because we do have Teddy still here to talk about bus flags, and I think that's a really important discussion. I think, as we've said, the RAC, I think, is most influential as things start going. So the beginning of Better Bus, and so something like this is a way to have a really tangible impact on how riders interact with the system. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion. That's right. That was a good catch.
Yeah, cool. That was a great introduction. That's exactly Everybody hear me okay? So thanks, Cole, for that introduction. I brought a few demonstrations here. You can see these are actually some historic, but also some current examples of bus flags. And you can see even between them there's some differences, because these are kind of examples of how we were testing, how we were trying to iterate and improve how we could display information to customers in a fairly challenging environment, right? How do you simultaneously show current and future conditions is not very easy, and something that in the future we're not hoping to have to do again, because we'll actually have one system and we'll be able to display one set of bus routes. So I guess in terms of moving ahead, do I have control here, or you guys? I do. No problem. Let's move on to the next slide. So as I said, how long do you think it took to get to these temporary bus stop flags? How long do you think it took? Does anybody have any guesses? Like, when did I start working on this project?
It had to have been like 2
3 years ago.
Not quite. I've been at Metro for about 1.5 years now, and it started right about when I started. And it's an interesting project because at first we were thinking about, again, temporary bus flags for the new network, but we were also thinking about long-term what we might do from a regional perspective, and that's where this DMV Moves initiative comes in. So you heard Randy talk about this earlier, which is an effort to create a sustainable funding source for the entire region. And this is one example of a collaborative discussion that's occurring between different agencies. We're also talking about training centers. We're also talking about lots of other places where we can work together and achieve economies of scale. I think at a basic level, if we can show that we can agree and work together on how we show bus information, that's a really great start for doing the big things. And this seems kind of simple. As we'll get into it, it's a little bit more complicated. But this is, again, an opportunity for Metro to work with partners to recognize the things that we can do together on behalf of our customers. Because at the end of the day, I should have said, I guess, at the beginning, I'm with the Customer Experience Department. I'm representing Sarah Meyer. We're thinking about every decision that Metro can make from a customer perspective. And there's a lot of reasons why bus flags look the way they do that aren't necessarily because of a customer's needs. It's everything in terms of the materials, it's in terms of how it's installed. There are lots of considerations going forward where we hope to have some influence and obviously work together with our internal partners inside Metro. That's super important, to work with maintenance and facilities and work with safety, but also to make sure this is actually working for customers. So let's move ahead to the next slide. We also want to make sure that we're not just thinking or assuming that we know what's going on. So at the beginning of this effort, we were actually using some questions that were attached to some initial Better Bus surveys to help us get a sense of how customers are currently using bus flags. And you can see in this case, we're talking about the kind of legacy Metro bus flags. And we got a strong response here about what people wanted to see in the future. And next, we'll talk about how we incorporate that into the actual temporary bus flag designs. So let's move on. So again, these are some more examples of what were some of the issues that we noticed about the flag and how we might be able to improve them. You guys are very familiar with, again, the original flag. We don't have to spend too much time because now there's kind of a newer thing to dissect. So let's move on to the next. This is really more of a kind of a regional question, which is when Metro has its own stop ID system, but Ride-On has a different, and OmniRide has a different, and Dash has a different, it can get very confusing. And these are just some examples. These are my personal pictures that I took from like down the street. Well, I guess not the Ride-On one, that was a farther away, but this one here is, you know, just a few blocks away. This is a challenge for customers. It's also a back-end challenge for operators, because it means that we don't actually all use the same back-end kind of systems for tracking how different bus stops are actually categorized and named. There's some real opportunities on both the front-facing and the back-end if we're able to agree on a single bus stop ID system. And so these two projects are really intertwined, how we can both present information to customers, but also organize it in terms of, again, the bus stop numbering system. These are two things that we're working on right now with our partner agencies, and these are things we want to talk about with you guys. So let's move to the next slide. Here's some examples of things that we think are better with the new temporary flag compared to the old. We've introduced this 24-hour service icon. We're able to show, again, both the old and the new routes, especially this week. That's really helpful to be able to see that kind of transition. Let's move to the next slide. I think this is a really great example of how we also were able to completely change the way that we literally produced these signs. It used to be, if you look closely at the old flags, those are hand-affixed, artisanal N2, N4, N6 decals. That is, again, like a real artisanal product that you are looking at. I don't want to say that that the new version is not beautiful, because it is, but those are single application decals that you're looking at. So that means that we're able to print one decal that fits across the entire face. That makes it a lot more efficient to not only print it in the first place, but then also to attach it. And so one of the really cool things about this solution is that we were able to reuse existing Metrobus flags. We didn't have to go out and buy any new ones. We actually had enough either up in the system or in reserve in the sign shop. And so these are, again, examples of some of the lessons that we learned. But here on the slide, you can see this D40, or just like here, the P14, is really big. And the reason we can do that is because we could create a dynamic design that recognizes if there's only one route that's stopping at that stop, you don't need to make it so small. You can actually expand it to fit the space. We have space to also include the destination. These terminals, destinations are really important from a customer perspective, and we're really happy that we've been able to include those at a fairly accessible font size. Going forward, we want to do even better, but let's move to the next slide. So I gave you some examples of things that we were thinking about. We talked about the font size. We talked about the actual decal itself. Before we start thinking about what might come next, it'd be really great to hear from you guys, your thoughts. The truth is, as good as this sign is, and I think it is strong, we're getting very good feedback in general from operators, from customers, the information is going to be out of date. It is out of date to some extent, right? The ends June 28th is not going to look as good June 28th, 2026. So we really do have a lot of motivation to get to a permanent future state. But I'll turn it over to you guys. This is a chance to talk about what you like and don't like about the current flags, and then we'll talk about what you'd like to see potentially in the new ones.
Thomas and then Eli, then I have something too.
Well, first of all, thank you for coming to talk to us. I personally think the new flags look great. I just have a few things. I guess first of all, I noticed, like for example, the D40 flag, it had the little like 24-hour sign. I was wondering if something similar could be done for like routes that are like only rush hour, like you could put like AM rush or PM rush. I mean, that info is like available like online or like stuff like that. And then I really appreciate like how they're the destination signs. And I was wondering for like bus routes that like have like different destinations, do they have like two destinations on the flag?
Yeah, the variants
Okay.
get complicated, and it's an ongoing discussion, kind of what is
Yeah.
and it was really actually part of the Better Bus planning is how can we reduce the overall number of variants, because it is confusing for customers. It's hard not only on bus flags but in digital systems and other displays.
Yeah.
So there's not as many examples as there used to be, but it is a confusing piece. I want to start with the first part, which is this is an ongoing discussion that we're having internally, is the extent to which a bus flag should be conveying service information like frequency, like you were talking about, or is it really wayfinding, part of our kind of wayfinding system?
Yeah.
Is this the best place to get information about when the bus is coming? Perhaps, but we know that there's better things like Transit app. We know that there's better things like real-time. We've got actual like e-ink screens at many stops. So with very precious space, every time you add a little icon, every time you add another piece of text, that means that you're, of course, reducing something else. And so that's a question that we have to go forward. It's very much with a given amount of space, and maybe in the future, it's a different size, or it's a different form factor. And that's, again, the kind of opportunity that we have right now. But those are exactly the kind of questions we're asking, and we're also wondering what is important for regional partners, right? If folks in Fairfax County have some things that they want to convey, is it important from a promotional perspective that people know that the bus is, again, a PM only or a PM rush only bus? Is it important for someone who's a casual rider to say, oh, if it comes every 15 minutes, then maybe I should consider that? This is like advertising in some ways for the bus. So those are definitely the kind of questions we're asking. In terms of, again, the actual like terminals, that's a kind of another whole other discussion. But for now, for the most part, we try to keep with single terminals.
Okay, yeah. And I guess just another thing I noticed quickly. So for the one in the middle, has both like the Prince George's County bus and then the Metro bus there, which I think is helpful to have them in one. But I could imagine it could get like a little bit crowded for like, especially some of the, like the downtown stops or like, you know, terminal stops, where there's like just a ton of different agencies operating. And you know, you have like the phone number and like the stop ID at the bottom. So I wonder if that could get like a little bit tricky, and especially with like the numbering too, because I know the Prince George's ones are unified, but like, you know, you have like, you know, like Montgomery County, they're still using just like regular numbers. And I don't know if this is still the case, but I know there's like one bus route that's like partially operated by Metro Bus, or used to, might have changed with Better Bus, and then partially by Montgomery County. It was a T2, now it's the M82, I think, or something like that. So I guess that's less of like a bus flag issue, more like operations side. But yeah, I was wondering, maybe there's some like, this could be like potential challenges to think about.
Absolutely. You've anticipated very well what's going to be a really challenging experience, for example, at shared stops downtown, where you've got multiple providers, multiple routes. I should say this middle one is actually one that was an early version. It ended up changing in the final version. If you go to PG County, you'll see that actually it does not use the distinctive red and blue color scheme of Metro. It's actually a white background and uses a slightly lighter blue to better match the PG County Transit. That was an example of us trying to show how we could work with partners to be able to simultaneously kind of conserve their branding identity, but also be able to show two agencies at the same time. So this middle one is actually not one that ever got out. This is one that we were kind of playing with. But going forward, we're going to still have that challenge of not only just with PG County, but also, again, with Ride On, with Fairfax Connector, or whoever else we might be able to work with. And we're going to be able, we have to be able to show to customers the most important information while satisfying our agency partners that we're not completely diminishing their brand, right? How do we concentrate on the information that's most important for customers? And that's what we're really here to talk about with you guys. Do you care so much about being able to see that the P95 is operated by Prince George's County Transit and the P96 is operated by Metrobus? Do you care that much about the actual like agencies, or you're more interested in where it's going, what time it might arrive? Those are some of the questions that we're interested in looking at.
I think of Eli, and then I'm on next on the list, then anyone else?
Sure.
Irene has.
Well, thank you. One thing that that was hard for me during this transition, which I didn't anticipate at first, was that initial letter. So I tried to do Better Bus on Monday, going to work, and in my neighborhood we have the D34 and the D36. I got on the wrong one, despite my best efforts. And of course, that's probably a learning curve. But I also saw a funny video online that kind of saw that same kind of issue, and someone saying like D this, D that, but which one takes me to the home, which I thought was funny. But maybe, I don't know if there's a way that the letter, although it could be important, maybe is a little diminished, or a different font, different bold, or something like that.
Okay.
Because I think we're so used to having, like in my neighborhood, I used to have a D8 and a G8, and so it was really easy to kind of know between. But now, D34 and D36, we're going so fast, sometimes we don't even see all the numbers.
Thanks.
Feedback specifically on the existing ones. and then I'll get into a little bit, I think, of where you're going, what we'd like to see. So I kind of like, on the old flags where it actually says, next bus, this is what this number is for. How do I, like, if I'm not necessarily, I'm new to the region, or I'm not tech savvy, or don't have a smartphone, how do I know that that number on there is so I can find out when the next bus is coming? Especially if there's not other information on the sign. So I don't hate having next bus. However, like I was looking through this deck when it got sent out earlier, and I really like what MARTA does in Atlanta. With the bus flag up top, and then you have some supplemental information further down on the pole. That's something that I really like. I'm sure you'll get into as we move through. But
Yeah, so I included in the appendix some examples from around the continent, actually. We've been having some really interesting conversations with partners in MARTA, but also in Montreal, Toronto, talking with folks who are trying to also balance language questions. So for example, how do we, again, provide not only access for people with low vision, but also language access? So Canada in particular is doing very interesting things with icons, colors, stuff like that. But one of the real concerns, and this goes to your point, is you shouldn't have to know what to know, right? And for everything that we put on here that is not obvious, so for example, if you look in the appendix, if you want to go to the MBTA example, Boston, you'll see that there's a 15-minute icon clock. Do you see that at the top? One of the really interesting things that we learned talking with them is that people didn't understand what that icon meant. Does it mean that the bus comes at 15 minutes, like 10:15, 11:15, 12:15, or is it comes every 15 minutes? So they had to add text under the icon to explain it, which kind of defeats the purpose of the icon. So these are kind of the questions, like, is it worth adding that information if you have to explain it? Or is it better to keep it really simple and everything that's on there is clear? And those are the kind of questions that we're kind of debating. The Atlanta example is also very interesting, and we agree that that panel at eye level is really interesting, especially from an accessibility perspective. If it's able to put the bus stop ID number front and center, if you're able to have some raised print and some braille, then that's something that, again, is really helpful. The question going forward is kind of what that means in terms of maintenance, what it means in terms of production, costs. So those are some of the considerations. But we've learned a lot from talking actually with the Atlanta folks about what to do and what not to do.
I know this kind of goes back to the nomenclature of the Better Bus system, and it's in a couple of these examples, but it's using X as a signifier for express, which I think is clever and has certainly helped me. I know, like on 16th Street, you have S2 and S9, and so that's, I think, something 6D and then 6X, D60 and D6X.
That's right.
So that's certainly helpful. Based off your conversations with other bus systems, have they found that X is a sufficient mean of expressing that it's an express bus, or has there been any confusion? I know it's leaps and bounds better than the current system, which is just you just need to know it's an express bus. I just didn't know if it was good enough or sufficient.
That's a great question. I don't have an answer for that. I think that's something that we could talk more about with other folks. I will say there is discussion inside Metro about whether to refer to, for example, the D6X as an express bus or a limited stops bus, right? And there are these kind of like nomenclature description questions that are still kind of percolating. What is the most descriptive way to explain this to a customer? Because again, at the end of the day, we're thinking about it, what makes sense for a customer? And if it doesn't make sense, how do we try to solve that? So I think that as we start going into the new bus flags, this is a chance for you guys to think about what are some of the problems that we can solve? What are some of the pain points that you have that might be addressed by, again, a future design?
I think Irene's got their hand raised.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Teddy. My question is about adding a QR code. And, we just mentioned the Atlanta example. I'm thinking of, not only maintenance of just maintaining the QR code, but just what are you sending it to when you scan it? But have you considered adding QR codes? And if so, could you make it in a bus configuration? That would be really cool.
That's a great idea. QR codes are controversial, right, for all the reasons that you mentioned. You don't have complete control. You know, someone can put a decal over it and send you to a whole other site. They are not so helpful for a good number of people who are confused by them. Like, it doesn't solve everything. At the same time, if you're accustomed to using them, it's a really quick way to get real-time arrival information. It can be really helpful to, again, not have to spell out WMATA.com on everything and instead be able to send them to a specific QR code. But I think that goes to another question that I'm interested in talking with you guys, which is it helpful for us to put WMATA.com on any sort of, bus flag? Would you guys need to know that? Are you guys just going to Google it and say, I'm looking for bus info, I'm looking for where the P14 takes me? So again, we're really trying to think about what is the essential information to put onto this flag, and how do you guys go about trying to find more information? So again, use your imagination. Nothing here is required. We can go into different directions. There's some things required, but you get the idea. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, I had a quick. Just a quick comment on the phone number.
Yeah.
So I noticed it got shifted to the Go Metro kind of letters, which I personally always feel like it's more difficult to type it in. And if if English was not my first language, but also even if I'm the kind of person that would just see a phone number and know how to call it, I think that makes it harder for those kind of populations who would be most likely to call. So I just wasn't sure why the numbers would change, and I was looking at some of the other signs, and I don't know if they had any similar kind of number shifts, so I don't know what the thought process was behind that.
Yeah, I think in this case it was to be more memorable, right? It's just easier to remember Go Metro. In terms of being able to plug it into phone, you're absolutely right. Knowing that G it's what, 5? I'm not sure. But in case, it's a good point.
They do on your iPhone. Or I'm not sure about Android, but.
It's been a while since I've typed in, like, with my old Nokia phone that was indestructible, I'd do that, but.
Was it T9? Was that what they called it?
But again, I think there's another question, which is, if we're able to put multiple providers onto one flag, what is the number that people should call? Should it go to a single number and then it's, press 2 to go to Ride On, press 3 to go to Dash? Should it be something else? These are questions that certainly our regional partners are very concerned about because they want to maintain a high level of customer service too.
And I think to the same point, to whether it's a QR code or a website, if you want a single flag, maybe like the middle one that has all of the providers, maybe it's not a WMATA website, or it's just maybe it's still maintained by WMATA, but it's like a dmvmoves.com, and then you put in your stop ID and get the information you're looking for. So it's not so much jurisdictional, like one agency specific. So if I'm looking for a Dash, I'm like, why would I go to the WMATA website? So I think that would help also like incentivize people to use a site like that. Cal, do you have something really quick? I just want to also flag for everyone that we are at 8 o'clock. So we're going to obviously go over today, but we'll try to keep moving quickly.
Hi, so I'm a future REC member, and I'm with Friends of the Bus Transit, and I've been riding these buses since I was 10. So, but I have a question for you. What's the ratio of the font size of the single line to the multiple lines?
It's a great question. So what we tried to do was maintain the same font height. So if you look at, for example, the N2 on the far right side, you compare that to the P95, those are basically equivalent. Those are about an inch or so tall. Sorry, I should be more precise. Those are actually 2 inches tall on the N2, the actual route ID. The terminals, the Friendly and the Oxon Hill, that's a little bit less than 1 inch. But what we really tried to do is maintain a 2-inch height for the actual route ID. By contrast, the P14, which is a single route, is double that.
It's double that, okay. So when you only have 2, I think if you can try to fill up the field, it would be better than that. But in actuality, it's not like that. On the stops I've taken many pictures of, if you have 2 lines, it fills up half the red field, not like 2/3 like you've got there. That's what I have on my phone. I'll show you when we're done.
Sure, but those are things that we're looking at, is how we can do an even better job in the future of when there's only two, making them even bigger.
So what's happening is people will ride the bus, they see one with a big sign, and then another route joins that street, and all of a sudden, the font size gets lower, and it's confusing, and they can't tell what's going on.
Would you agree then that maintaining the biggest font size possible is an important thing for you?
No,
Okay.
I think not.
Okay.
I think maybe shrinking the size of the single one would be better.
Okay.
Not necessarily that small, but, you know. So the other comments I have to do with two situations. One is the rush hour buses. Be nice to have maybe a lighter color red or something like that in the background, because we can't tell. We have one, on Nebraska Avenue, there's one place where we have 4 lines. 2 of them are all day and 2 of them are rush hour. And you can't tell, it's not like the odd numbers with the rush hours like they used to be. So if they could lighten that up a little bit. And there was something else. That might have been it.
And I think those are, again, great suggestions, and the question is, like we talked about with the Boston example, is how much do we have to explain that? How do we let folks know, again, what that background color indicates, and how do we make it so that it's not just a hidden feature that if you know, you know, but if you don't, you wouldn't be as aware. So those are all the questions that we're in right now.
Well, I guess you have to find this balance between somebody who's not like a commuter you're going to be used to this really quickly and is going to be looking for that difference, for example, in shading for the rush hour buses versus somebody who's an occasional rider who's never going to be savvy with those things.
And that's why we try to talk to as many folks as possible. So this is very, very helpful.
Yep. There's one more thing. I just can't remember what it is. Okay, thank you.
We'll go to Alex and Brian, and we'll try to be as succinct as we can.
And there's one more slide we can go ahead to that just had a few prompts in terms of looking ahead.
Thank you for the great presentation. I really appreciate you taking the time to come see us tonight. I'll try to make it as brief as possible. With the new Better Bus flags, I think you guys did a really good job. Like, they're a significant improvement over the old ones, particularly with the 24-hour symbol, the indication of destinations, and the bigger font. I think there are a lot of opportunities to improve even more as we get into the permanent design. Kind of going off of what we already did, I definitely want to keep the 24-hour sign. I think with the font sizing, we could even be a little more dynamic and try to take up, because on that middle sign there, right, there's some empty space in the bottom. We could maybe size up P90, P95, and P96 a little more. Because I like, from that is if you're even a block away, you can sometimes read it, which you could not do at the smaller font size. Yeah. One other thing another piece of feedback I have on the new signs is I think some of the stops are missing overnight service extensions. So for example, the D20 stops at Farragut during the day but goes to Foggy Bottom while Metro Rail isn't operating, and I think the signs on that route are currently missing that.
We're doing a fair amount of review of, again, those kind of tricky ones, and there are some ones that have overnight or late night variants that are challenging.
Yeah,
So
and there's always, sorry to interrupt, but there's always a fine balance on communicating that information, how much is too much, but how much is the right amount. So I'm personally a little torn on how deep you want to go with that service information.
Yep.
I don't like those 15-minute clock icons because, as you agree, they're it's kind of hard to understand what they mean for the average rider. Another opportunity I think is potentially adding cardinal directions to destinations on some of the signs, as we're kind of doing that with the rail system now. But thinking is if you're coming out of a Metro Rail station, you're coming out of a building, you might not necessarily be oriented with the street grid, and you might not know what the bus destination is, but you might know where you need to go. You need to go north, but you don't necessarily know that north is Silver Spring. I think that might be helpful. What else I have? With the middle flag there on the operators, I think if you're not familiar already with the existing variety of bus operators in the region, it might be a little hard to understand what Metrobus and Transit mean, as if you're someone who's new to the region. So I wonder if there's a potential opportunity on that, for example, Metrobus is red and the Prince George's County buses are blue, or some kind of color factor there. And then one other piece of feedback I got of the last few days talking to operators is with reflectivity on the new bus signs. I've heard from operators that it's very hard to see at night, particularly with the middle one that has no reflectivity at all, and on the leftmost one, which only maintains its reflectiveness on that leftmost Metrobus column, whereas the flag itself with the blue and the red background were painted over, so they do not have the reflectivity that is on the farmost right sign, which you can kind of see here at the lighting. That's kind of all I have, hopefully.
No, those are
relatively
excellent
brief.
observations. I will say the middle one never actually made it out. This was
Okay.
just a test one, but you're absolutely right that one of the main concerns when we do talk to operators is about the reflectivity and how the entire surface is not reflective like it is or was in the old Metrobus one.
Mhm.
So that is something that we're absolutely looking at.
Yeah. And then lastly, I will say that I'm definitely supportive of a regional stop ID system and regional call number, whether that's actually a consolidated call center or just like a consolidated number that can then attach you to wherever you need to go.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
I can't speak for Pat or John, but I've worked with Pat for 4.5 years, and I know he's constantly referring work that the AAC is doing to the RAC, so I will reciprocate. And if you haven't thought about it already or haven't done it already, to engage with them around this subject, especially as it pertains to that last prompt. And I know you would only add transit agencies that want to be on the signs on there. And I know it's kind of an ongoing topic with DMV moves, because one of the rationales for not consolidating the various bus systems was that they want that additional level of flexibility. And so I think it's tough because some agencies are going to be enthusiastic about being on your signs, and some agencies specifically don't want to be. I don't want to say don't want to be. That's probably a mischaracterization. But they prioritize the flexibility of being able to change the stops based off of, changing circumstances and ridership habits. So it's not really a question, but more just a general comment that there's going to be a lot of agencies that this doesn't even apply to them because they may not want to be listed on there, and that it may look different. I don't know if you've had conversations around that. I know it's an active conversation in DMV moves. That's not a reason not to create slightly more standardization, and I know you all have been in more active conversations about that in private, but just something to flag for our consideration.
Yeah, so first, I'll be at the Bus and Rail Subcommittee meeting of the AAC on July 14th, so come back for that. Absolutely, I think it's very important, and that's actually why this last question is on here. 100% there. On the second piece, the working group number 3, customer amenities and wayfinding of DMV moves, where I represent Metro, is asking those exact questions. What do we do about service changes? How can we make sure that these signs are actually maintained? What about, again, the specific service that we offer that is different than a different neighbor? So there are many concerns that we will need to overcome, and the design is kind of only one part of it. And there's a lot of reasons why we have separate systems, separate flags. Overcoming some of that history is challenging.
I mean, otherwise, I really do like the fact that there's some consolidation instead of just having 8 different signs stacked on top of each other. That's an exaggeration, but...
But I think a question for this group is that really a big issue for you? Like, does it make it difficult to have that? We think it's difficult, but we also want to make sure that that is a major concern for customers, that we're solving a problem that actually exists.
I like how, I think I see this with Ride-On, how they have like a skinny one.
The blade.
Yeah, I think that doesn't bother me that much, but I see like the example you had earlier where there's like a whole bunch of them, then it starts to get a little crowded and confusing, and especially these ones that just say DC motor coach or drop off only, like that's giving me no information. But when it's like a little something, I don't really care that much personally.
And I think, again, it's getting that balance like we've talked about. What is too much information, what's not enough. And I think what we would like to be able to get to is later this summer actually creating some concepts that people can respond to, that you guys can come see, that we could actually create some physical prototypes, install them at areas around the DMV, bring partners out, check them out with their audiences, their communities, bring out people from the AAC, bring folks who maybe don't speak English as a first language, see how it works, and be able to make improvements based on that. So that's where we're going, and we hope that you'll be a part of that.
Awesome. Thank you, Teddy. And I'm going to have to end this conversation here because we do have to get through the rest of our agenda, and we're running over time. But I appreciate everyone still sticking around. So thank you, Teddy, for sticking
thanks.
out the whole time for
Well,
us.
my email and Sarah's email is at the end of this presentation as well, so we would love to hear from you guys.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll be seeing you again soon.
Yep.
All right, so next up,
That's a great question.
next up, we are going to our outreach and member report out. This is RAC members' opportunity to share what you're hearing around the system, and any other things you'd like to share out. And I think, Alex, I'm going to go to you first for just a high-level report out from the DMV moves, just kind of where things are at in the process, obviously respecting that the meeting is a closed meeting, and this is a public meeting, so.
I'll try to keep it relatively brief, but as I talked about earlier, the Community Partners Advisory Group met last week. I think they meet like roughly 3 to 4 times a year, is probably about accurate. And we're getting kind of towards the end of the DMV Moves initiative as a whole. The last public task force meeting was in May. I believe the next one is in September. And yeah, I have the timeline back here just to make sure I get it right. So yeah, right now, what they are doing this summer is they are finalizing the proposal for the regional approach, and they are finalizing the action plan. Let me get a little more close to the mic. The draft plan is scheduled to be shared with advisory groups in September, shared with the task force in October, and then finally adopted this November of this year. The current, I suppose, debates are mostly over funding commitments, in terms of like how much do our jurisdictional electeds like how much money are they able to and willing to commit to funding regional transit initiatives. Obviously nothing is certain yet, but things do seem to be looking good, at least on the Metro Rail system capital project side in terms of getting some dedicated funding. But we're going to kind of have to see. In terms of regional collaboration for agencies, I think there is there's definitely interest. In terms of just the how is currently still being figured out, in terms of like to what extent is collaboration going to be happening, and on like what specific things, like whether that be fleet management or consolidated signs with digital stop ID, and stuff like that. I will say the biggest takeaway that I talked about earlier was just that making sure that elected officials, and we really hammer in this pitch as like customer advocates, that if we do not act now, we are going to pay for it later. Buses are only getting slower, and that means we need to spend more money to maintain existing service, or we have to cut service. So it really is just like we need to act on something now to really, especially on the bus priority side, to get things moving faster. That'll be all.
Awesome. And I think to encourage you to read through those notes, but we do need to collect those physical copies, just
I'll come around and get them.
to respect the closed meeting nature of DMV Moves. So just for information for y'all. So we will collect those before we leave today. What else were we hearing?
Yeah, we launched a whole new bus network this weekend.
Yeah.
You didn't hear anything?
Not about Better Bus. This was actually a question I was going to ask Randy, but we ran out of time and there are more pressing matters. And maybe they have, I just haven't been following it, in which case I think we as a RAC could potentially address in the future. But whether or not there's a policy update in the zero-emission bus fleet acquisition. I mean, I think everyone is on the same page, including the board, given the comments that they've made about the extremely high cost of those buses and the strain on the capital system. But I didn't know whether there are formal target dates for both buying buses and a complete fleet overhaul, whether those were still technically the dates or years, or if they wanted to change that. So maybe just something for us to think about for the future.
Great. We will get that question to Randy and send it back out. Thomas?
So I just had a few comments, I guess. Some things I noticed about the Better Bus rollout. In my experience, I think it was fairly smooth, but I did notice a few issues. So Monday, I was taking the bus back home, and so there was I was on the bus. I was the next stop was mine, except there had been a stop that was eliminated, just before where I pulled the cord, and so the driver thought I wanted to get off there, so he actually stopped there, and so I didn't get off, and so I assumed he saw that, oh, nobody got off, he's probably going to the next one, but then he didn't stop at the next one, so I had to get off at the stop after that and then walk back. So I don't know. I mean, I assume they've trained the operators pretty well. Maybe the operator was trying to be nice, because I assume there are a lot of people who aren't fully caught up with the system, the new system. But I think that's maybe something to address. Just we have a new system in place. Maybe maybe some people might be confused, but I think we should really stick to what we have now. And then some other things. So I noticed I was walking around today at the Friendship Heights bus terminal area, and I noticed a few things. So first, they have some of the old maps there, which I think could be a little bit confusing. Maybe especially for people who are not from DC, they see the old bus map, and then the numbers are completely different, especially because from Friendship Heights there was a lot of routes eliminated, and then some totally new ones put in there. And then another thing I noticed, there was an eliminated there's a bus stop in the terminal, or one of the bus bays, I guess. And it had one of those tablets that they've been adding, where it has the it shows oh, this bus is coming now. But I was a little confused because that stop had been eliminated, and I don't know when that tablet had been put in there. But that's another I guess thing to think about, especially because I saw another one. It was on Wisconsin Avenue. It was another eliminated stop, and it also had a tablet. And I mean, those are definitely helpful, but I guess they should be transferred to to stops in service. And at Friendship Heights, I guess it would be it's I guess a little confusing because they also have I think it's LED displays with the bus. So yeah, those are just some things I noticed, but I'd say for the most part it's been pretty smooth. Yeah.
Okay. And to clarify one of the things you said, the driver stopped at an old bus stop when you pulled, that it had been removed?
Yeah, he stopped at an old bus stop.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. So I think I'm taking notes of these things. I think what Randy said is give that feedback to staff, so we're going to send those things along. And I'm hearing, make sure drivers don't stop at old bus stops when you pull the thing. When are the old maps going to get replaced, especially at terminals and frequent stops, and tablets from eliminated signs? Okay. Yeah, Matthew, and then Brandon.
We're still in member report out, right?
Yeah.
So I was at the Edgewick Civic Association's monthly meeting, so Northeast DC monthly meeting. I was there. My dad is the president of that civic organization. I was there just to kind of get feedback. Zachary Parker, who's a council member, had members of his public information staff there to kind of give out. They had brochures, pamphlets of the route changes and when to and what to expect. And the constituent population that was there was very frustrated. I guess they had eliminated a stop on Edgewood Street. It's a huge apartment complex, and there's a senior apartment home that's on that complex as well. And that stop was more easily accessible versus where they would have to walk maybe a block and a half to the new stop under the Better Bus network. So I guess over the term, there was some back and forth with the council member's office and some letter writing, and they got that stop put back in. But what I found was there's a lot of animosity and consternation in that particular setting towards the change that's happening without doing the legwork to like figure out like, hey, you know, there's an app, Metro Pulse, that can help you figure this thing out. There's resources all over the place that can help you figure this thing out. Just a general resistance to change was my takeaway from that. And I've had conversations with other users and riders in the system, and that also seems to be the takeaway, that there's a lot of resistance to the change that's happening without really trying to like plug in. So I think it's important, like as a RAC and as the larger Metro organization, remember like the mission ahead. There's going to be naysayers in this, and there are going to be people who are generally opposed to it. We really got to dig deep and figure out if that consternation, that, you know, them being against it is really founded in anything that's, you know, critical, or it's just like, I don't like the change that's happening, and that's why I'm angry. You know, there was this introduction of like race and socioeconomic factors in it. It's not funny, but I think they're kind of, in a lot of ways, missing the point. Like, hey, we're trying to make the system better, more accessible, more efficient for all. And there are some little tranches that will maybe have a slight experience, you know, little decline in service. But to get the whole system moving more efficiently, I think it's important that we help everybody get the word out to understand, like, hey, this is the direction we're going in. There are resources to support your trips wherever you're going. If you have questions, there are places to go to ask to get the answers versus just like taking the abuse that may come up. So that's my take. That's my report out for that.
Thank you. And they got Brandon next, and then Irene, and then Alex.
I guess I'll start with Better Bus. I think that there are a few folks who I know whose commutes have changed from one bus to two buses, and I think that that's probably driven by the feedback form that said that people would prefer shorter routes or shorter overall journeys if it meant more transfers. I just think that that has not fully sunk in with folks, so I think that, you know, we as members of the RAC can do more on that front. But I'm also curious if Metro Comms could maybe pursue something of explaining that, hey, like, maybe there are some routes that have transfers, but there's also expansion of service. I think that on X, at least, they've been posting like new bus route profiles for new routes that go to National Harbor, that go to Bowie, et cetera. But I think that more of that education could be helpful. I was riding the bus like the first 2 days on the D74, which I think was the original H8, but it now extends from like Rhode Island Avenue all the way to Foggy Bottom. Originally it stopped at like Columbia Heights or Adams Morgan. And there were a lot of folks asking the driver like, hey, it goes to Foggy Bottom, does it still go to Adams Morgan? And so sometimes the drivers seem to be a little bit not in the know, and I think then riders kind of took the initiative to be like, hey, you're on the right bus. And so I think that like encouraging that in a way could be helpful, but also if there's a way, for instance, I remember when, I don't remember what it was, but obviously during COVID, there were like masks that you could pick up. I'm wondering if like pamphlets for bus route profiles could be something that could be added back potentially to some buses, especially ones where there's like the most amount of confusion. But obviously there are costs to that. Finally, I think bus stop relocation and consolidation, there's also been some confusion as to like, especially I think older folks who previously had, you know, senior center stops get cut even after, you know, multiple rounds of feedback. I think that maybe some like proactive outreach from Metro, or I guess reactive now, to sort of address those concerns could be helpful, because it seems like those folks feel like there's no outlet. They go to their ANC, the ANC puts up a resolution, WMATA isn't changing the system. So those are like the Better Bus outreach updates I have. Then I have some general things. The first thing is like a bit odd. It was like the Saturday night of Pride, and I had a bunch of friends in the Gallery Place Chinatown station where suddenly this like really terrible smell like went through the entire station, and everyone had like their like shirts up covering it. It seemed like a one-off event. Hasn't happened since, but I had like 5 people text me being like, hey, like, why is there this terrible smell in the entire station where everyone's feeling it? I don't know if it was just like something went off. Other than that, I've gotten some feedback on escalators during peak commute times being non-ideal at transfer stations like L'Enfant Plaza and Gallery Place, where there's only one escalator going the direction of rush hour traffic. So maybe looking at that. And then finally, some folks who are not upset, but I think that Metrobus has started to flash fare required, and sometimes buses are coming really fast by stations, and so they're missing the route name because it's flashing fare required, so maybe decreasing that frequency. Similarly with announcements at stations with those new signs where there's only like 2 lines and 2 of them are error or like, you know, delay issues, I think that that could also be something to consider changing as well.
Thank you. And I think Irene, you're next on my list, and then Alex.
Thank you, Cole. I quickly like to add on to the last comment regarding new buses and information or even signage that could be placed. The mask, it's a really great idea. You made me think of, what about inside? I know we have to pay for things and have advertising. For the new routes, can we have a sign that, you know, a map maybe, or small map of end-to-end points? And that might help that not only it could help the driver, but also, you know, patrons coming on the bus, and it has like a something to reference as opposed to them having to check either a pamphlet or a phone, just to, you know, especially if it's a major change for the route. So just wanted to put that in there. But my initial comment, I sent this to John and Cole last week. One of the Better Bus Network volunteers at Fort Totten, which is my home metro station, mentioned, walked up and said, "Hey, I'm a RAC member. How's things going?" He mentioned while working at the Addison Road metro station, there were concerns about the changes in routes, and some buses that normally would terminate at that metro station, the new route would pass through. And so there were concerns that, you know, would the bus stop long enough to pick up people if someone anticipates that, oh, you know, I have a minute or 2 or however long to catch the bus, that there may be some, you know, patrons and customers that cannot, there might be some issues with that. So just wanted to pass that on. I'm not sure if maybe there's a way to evaluate buses where you had a change from the terminal station that now go to a new endpoint, and to focus some type of signage or mainly educating drivers about, you know, just to be mindful instead of, you know, maybe flying through that zone, to, you know, maybe pause a minute.
Okay, good. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Alex.
All right, hold on, let me pull up my notes. But first thing I want to say is, like, all things considered, the rollout has been very smooth, and I think that's in great part to the tremendous amount of customer outreach that everyone at Metro contributed to. It was great also on Sunday. I went out for probably 4 hours at least, take a ride on the new routes. WMATA staff worked literally everywhere. At every major metro station, every major transit station, even on some of the routes, like, there were people. Like, I think I counted 7 Metro employees at King Street. Ran into a bunch at Ballston and Seven Corners as well. And they've been out helping customers all day. And it's not even just outreach staff, it's also the planning team that's out there. The ones who plan the routes are there monitoring conditions on day 1, which has been great to see. A few minor concerns, because on the whole, everything has been pretty smooth. Like, most people have been able to get to where they're going, maybe day 1 or day 2 learning curve, but most people are able to adjust pretty well. The lack of, as for concerns, the lack of, like, printable timetables, I think has been pretty widespread from what I've heard. We don't have those, like, printed little fold-out paper brochures that are going out to buses and stops anymore, and I understand that, like, there's an efficiency perspective from not having to, like, stock all individual bus stops with timetables, and I think that's totally fair. But if you yourself, as a customer, wanted to print out a timetable at your home, you would have to go to 6 different web pages and print things 6 times to get both directions for weekday service, Saturday service, and Sunday service, which is a way too much effort, in my opinion, for customers who might just be trying to help educate their community. So it would be nice, I think, if Metro could put together just like a simple PDF that you could print that has all directions at all times, all days of the week. So that way customers wouldn't have to make 6 different print requests. WMATA doesn't necessarily have to do the distribution to every stop or transit center or on the bus lines with those schedules, but I think just having that consolidated PDF would be a huge help. I kind of talked about that sign reflectivity thing at night earlier. That has been a concern brought up by operators and even a customer too, in terms of just it's now harder to see the stops at night, especially if they're, like, hidden behind trees or other objects in the way. So I really hope the permanent stop design can take care of that. There have been some minor hiccups with stop sign, like bus stop flags being misplaced or absent in some situations, but I think those are generally getting taken care of, although it might take up to a few weeks to get to them all. Do we want to list as well in terms of just like those minor issues? Because I think Randy brought up something like that earlier. Is that something we want to put together?
That's what I'm working on is y'all are speaking, I'm keeping a running list. And I'll
Okay.
put ones that should go in the email, and then I'll make sure the RAC gets a copy of that too, so if we miss something.
I have a bunch of like really small things with like specific bus
Send them
stops
my
in my
way.
community that I can just give to you because
Yeah,
I don't want
send them my way.
Yeah. In general as well, and this, as Randy was talking about, might just be due to summer traffic being down. There are a lot of early buses, and I think people have probably noticed this if they've been out, but I have caught buses 5, even sometimes up to 10 minutes early running in the past few days. As I took a little data today at 4 p.m. actually, 15% of Metro buses were more than 2 minutes early today at 4 p.m. And I understand it's totally like fine. It's, first day rollout, there's hiccups and everything like that. But there are a lot of buses that I think just have too much runtime scheduled that hopefully they can fix in December. But there's a pretty long list on that front from what I understand. And I think that's for the December schedule change. And that is all I have.
All right, anyone else? Yeah, Eli.
Yeah, the one thing from Better Bus that I noticed was I was actually walking in my neighborhood at night, and there is a bus stop that is no longer in operation. But I don't remember, I think there was a sign that used to say, like, this bus stop will no longer be in operation, but it has since disappeared. And so this poor man was out at night and trying to find a way home and, like, couldn't. So I don't know if there's just a checkup on those old bus stops or what the plan is for removing the stops entirely so that, people aren't just like standing by somewhere at the middle of the night and nothing's coming.
Did the bus flag have the decal? Are you talking about the decal that's on the bus flag? Or like, I know those stops also got, I saw like the paper was attached.
Yeah,
and that obviously like.
the paper's gone,
John, did they already take those down?
We haven't, but someone could have. I mean, they're paper, so they're not,
Yeah, I just wondered.
Probably
about was the decal still on that bus flag or was that
No.
gone too?
There was nothing. It just looked like a normal old bus stop. And I can share the.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you give us the location, we can get our bus stop folks on that.
Real quick as well, another thing I wanted to add is there's been some confusion at stops that have been discontinued for Metrobus that are still in operation for other regional agencies. I think I might have brought this up before, like Langston Boulevard in Arlington, the 3Y is gone, but the ART 55 remains. And there's been confusion if there are ART buses still on that stop. So it'd be great if we could potentially get more clarifying information out there and or
Alex,
get those bus flags taken down.
Have you noticed an ART bus sign? Because, ART's also been putting up bus signs specific to ART. Have you noticed those at those
I think
stops?
I might have seen a few, but they're not widespread yet, at least. But I'll check up on that. I heard this from a friend like yesterday.
I wonder if that feedback line to the team is, let's prioritize removal of stops, signs that, bus flags at stops where multiple jurisdictional partners have signs. So that way people don't assume that it's implying for all of the stops, all of the other partners. I think that's how I'd format that one. All right, yeah.
So I guess it's not necessarily a question. I have a question and a comment. The chief of staff minded me is rolling. For this member out or this outreach, can that be done as far as a report out before we come to the meeting, time-based? For example, each member has to give a report out. If you have a report of concern, can you present those? Meetings are held once a month. Can you present those to the board so give the chair opportunity to review those before actually coming to the meeting and taking the time to discuss those during the meeting? And then we can discuss those in a summary during that meeting time. That's one of the questions I had. Also, the chief of staff minded me is going. Nothing against Alex or anyone else, but I feel like if it's a closed meeting, it should be closed. And we shouldn't be able to discuss that in the setting, especially when we have guests in that setting as well, who may not have been invited to that closed meeting. And also, we're going to give out paperwork that should be redacted. There are certain things that shouldn't. So can we, in the future, maybe if we're going to have a closed meeting, do a redaction, redaction of the minutes, a redaction of the summaries, and also just being particular about making sure we know what is actually to be discussed and what can't be discussed.
Yeah, that's on me. And that's something I moved very fast today, and I caught as we were sitting here. So, yeah, we're on the same page there. So that one's on me. Anything else?
Just a comment, it's not urgent, but probably sometime in November and December, just as a recommendation for an agenda item, is having Jordan come and speaking about performance review from Q1, because I'm sure it's gonna look a lot different with the Better Bus rollout and some of the metrics that she's tracking. And I think because a lot of members of the RAC are relatively new, they may not have heard from her, and I think that would be a great, fantastic introduction to kind of performance tracking from WMATA. That's just a recommendation.
All right. So next item on our agenda is just announcements. We do not meet in August, just for everyone. So what we're going to try to do is put together something we can do in the community, whether that's a tour or something. We're working on it. We'll see if that comes to fruition. But we do not have a public any meeting in August, and neither does the board. So that's kind of why we do that. So we'll be back together for our next monthly meeting in September. Continue to send Better Bus feedback to me, to John, as these things happen, especially I don't want to wait 2 months for us to recirculate any issues that might arise that we're seeing. We all have each other's emails. You don't have to bombard everyone's email. You can bombard my email, all you would like.
And so just for clarification, I believe, John, the next 2 meetings are virtual. Is that right? September, October, and then November's in person? Is that how that works?
September in person, I'm sorry, September virtual, October in person, because we count August
Ah, yes.
to get to quarterly.
So if people are thinking about their schedules, October for in-person. Awesome.
All right. Thank you all for staying late. If there's no objection, I'm going to adjourn this meeting at 8:37 p.m.
Well done. We haven't had a long meeting in a long time. Thank you, guys. This was
Thanks,
awesome.
everyone.